They say invisibility is a gift when you're poor in a world that devours the weak. Elara Voss had perfected it, 8 years as a paid shadow, standing silent in ballrooms where a single wrong glance could end her. But tonight, at the Ashford estate, that invisibility shattered. Duke Ronan Hale's cold gray eyes found her across a sea of silk and champagne, and for the first time in her life, someone truly saw her. Not the furniture, not the backdrop, her. And in that moment, Elara knew. Her carefully constructed survival was about to burn to ash. Stay until the end to see how a woman with nothing becomes unstoppable. Like this video and comment what city you're watching from. The Ashford ballroom smelled like wealth. Imported roses, aged wine, and the particular musk of people who'd never once worried about their next meal. Elara stood against the eastern wall, hands folded, spine straight, eyes carefully unfocused. The trick to being invisible wasn't slouching or hiding. It was standing exactly where you belonged, so utterly unremarkable that eyes slid past you like water off glass. She'd been doing this for 8 years. 8 years since the textile factory where her mother worked had caught fire. 8 years since her father's cough had gone from occasional to constant to the reason they'd lost their tiny apartment in the merchant quarter. 8 years since 15-year-old Elara Voss had knocked on the door of Madame Celeste's establishment and asked, no, begged, for any work at all. Madame Celeste didn't run a brothel, despite what the crueler gossips whispered. She ran something arguably more essential to the capital's social machinery, a service providing refined, educated companions for events where appearances mattered. Widows needed respectable company at the opera. Elderly nobles required attentive listeners at garden parties. Nervous debutantes paid for experienced chaperones who knew which fork to use and when to laugh at a duke's terrible jokes. Elara had become one of Madame Celeste's most requested companions, not because she was beautiful, though she'd grown into her features well enough, with dark hair and darker eyes that her mother used to call storm-touched. Not because she was witty or charming, but because Elara Voss knew how to disappear. Tonight she'd been hired by Lady Pembroke, a widow in her 60s who'd recently inherited a fortune and desperately needed someone to stand beside her at the season's most prestigious gathering. The Ashford Winter Ball wasn't just a party. It was a battlefield disguised in silk and candlelight, where marriages were arranged, alliances formed, and reputations destroyed before the third waltz. "More champagne, dear?" Lady Pembroke's voice startled Elara from her thoughts. "No, thank you, my lady." Elara's smile was practiced, pleasant, empty. "I'm perfectly content." Lady Pembroke patted her arm, the gesture somewhere between affectionate and possessive, and drifted back into conversation with a cluster of matrons dissecting someone's dress with surgical precision. Elara returned to her post against the wall, cataloging exits out of habit. North door to the gardens, south to the servant corridors, west to the main entrance where carriages waited in the freezing December night. The orchestra struck up a quadrille. Couples swirled onto the dance floor in a practiced chaos of silk and superficiality. Elara watched without really seeing, her mind already counting the hours until she could collect her fee, return to the small room she rented above a bakery, and sleep. Then she felt it. The weight of someone's attention, sharp and deliberate as a blade between the ribs. Her training screamed at her not to react. Don't look, don't engage, don't exist. But her body betrayed her, some primal instinct that predated Madame Celeste's careful lessons. Her eyes lifted. Across the ballroom, through the swirling dancers and the glittering chandeliers, a man was staring directly at her, not glancing, not accidentally catching her in his peripheral vision. Staring, with the kind of focused intensity that made her skin prickle with awareness. Duke Ronan Hale. She recognized him from the society papers Lady Pembroke read obsessively. 32 years old, inherited his title at 19 when his father died in a hunting accident, turned a respectable duchy into one of the most powerful political and financial forces in the kingdom. Never married, despite a parade of eligible women throwing themselves at him every season. Known for being brilliant, ruthless, and colder than the winter wind currently rattling the ballroom windows. He stood near the fireplace, one hand holding a glass of what looked like untouched whiskey, his dark evening clothes immaculate. His hair was black, swept back from a face all sharp angles and aristocratic bones. But it was his eyes that held her frozen, gray, pale, like winter ice over deep water, and they were locked on her with an intensity that made her forget how to breathe. "Look away!" her survival instinct screamed. "Your furniture, your wallpaper, your nothing." But she couldn't. Something in that gaze had hooked into her, reeling her in across 40 feet of polished marble. "Elara," Lady Pembroke's voice broke the spell. "Are you quite all right? You've gone pale." Elara blinked, finally tearing her eyes away. Her heart hammered against her ribs. "I'm fine, my lady. Perhaps just a touch warm." "The crush in here is dreadful," Lady Pembroke agreed, already distracted by a passing acquaintance. "Do take some air in the conservatory if you need it." Elara murmured something appropriate and risked another glance toward the fireplace. The Duke was gone. Relief and something uncomfortably close to disappointment flooded through her. She was being ridiculous. Men like Ronan Hale didn't see women like her. She'd imagined it, that's all. The heat, the late hour, the champagne fumes in the air. "You're very good at it." The voice came from directly beside her, deep, measured, with the kind of aristocratic accent that came from generations of privilege. Elara's head snapped around. Duke Ronan Hale stood less than 2 feet away, close enough that she could see the silver threading through the gray of his eyes, close enough to smell cedar and something darker, more complex. Her mouth went dry. Every lesson Madame Celeste had drilled into her evaporated. Forgive me, Your Grace. Good at what?" "Vanishing." His gaze swept over her, clinical and thorough. "Standing in plain sight while convincing everyone you're not there. It's quite impressive." Heat crept up her neck. "I don't know what you mean." "Don't you?" One dark eyebrow lifted. "I've been watching you for 20 minutes. You haven't moved, haven't spoken unless spoken to, haven't drawn a single eye except mine. That level of invisibility requires either exceptional training or exceptional fear. Which is it?" The words felt like a trap. Every instinct told her to deflect, to smile blandly and excuse herself, to vanish exactly as he'd accused. But something in his directness, in the way he spoke to her like she was a person rather than a piece of scenery, made her answer honestly. "Both." His expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. "Honest. That's rare in this room." "I'm rarely in this room, Your Grace." "Ronan." She blinked. "I'm sorry?" "My name is Ronan. And you are?" "Elara." The answer escaped before she could stop it, before she could remember that paid companions didn't introduce themselves to dukes, that this entire conversation was careening toward disaster. "Elara Voss?" "Elara." He said her name slowly, testing it. "You're here with Lady Pembroke." It wasn't a question. Of course he'd noticed. He'd probably noticed everything about her in those 20 minutes of observation, the quality of her dress, good fabric, simple cut, 2 seasons out of fashion, the practiced way she held herself, the careful neutrality of her expression. "I am," she confirmed, glancing toward where Lady Pembroke was deep in conversation. "I should return." "Why?" The question stopped her. "Why?" "Why should you return? She's occupied. You're not needed at this precise moment, unless you're afraid of being seen talking to me." "I'm not afraid of you, Your Grace." "Ronan," he corrected again. "And I think you are. Not of me specifically, perhaps, but of what conversation with me might mean." He was right, dangerously, accurately right. Already she could feel eyes turning toward them, curiosity kindling in the surrounding crowd. A duke didn't speak to a paid companion, not at length, not with this kind of focus. People would talk. Lady Pembroke might not hire her again. Word would spread through Madame Celeste's network. "Your mind is racing," Ronan's voice cut through her spiral. "Calculating consequences, mapping escape routes. You do that constantly, don't you?" "You don't know me." "No," he agreed, "but I'd like to." The simple statement hit harder than any flowery compliment could have. Elara stared at him, searching for the trap, the game, the ulterior motive. Men like him didn't say things like that to women like her without reason. "Why?" The word came out sharper than she'd intended. "Because in a room full of people performing for each other, you're the only one who isn't. You're surviving. There's a difference." Something cracked in her chest, some carefully maintained wall she'd built between who she was and who she pretended to be. You don't know anything about surviving. Don't I? His smile was blade thin. My father died and left me a duchy on the verge of financial collapse and a sister barely out of the nursery. I was 19. Every vulture in the capital descended, waiting for me to fail so they could pick the bones clean. I'm still here. So yes, Miss Voss, I know something about survival. The words hung between them, raw and real in a way that conversation in this room never was. Elara found herself believing him, found herself wanting to know more, found herself forgetting every single rule she'd lived by for 8 years. Ronan! A woman's voice cut through the moment like a whip crack. There you are. I've been looking everywhere. The woman who swept up to them was stunning, all golden hair and emerald silk, with the kind of beauty that came from generations of careful breeding. Lady Cordelia Ashford, daughter of the house, and according to the society papers, the front-runner in the eternal race to become Duchess Hale. Cordelia. Ronan's tone cooled several degrees. I was just speaking with Miss Voss. Cordelia's gaze flicked to Elara, dismissing her in a fraction of a second. How lovely. But darling, Lord Ashford wants to discuss the mill contracts, and you know how he gets when made to wait. Then he'll have to practice patience. Cordelia's perfect smile tightened. Ronan, I'll find him when I'm ready. His voice held quiet steel. Excuse us. The dismissal was clear. Cordelia's eyes flashed with something ugly before her social mask snapped back into place. Of course, I'll let him know you're occupied. She swept away in a rustle of silk and barely concealed fury. Elara's stomach knotted. She'd just watched herself become part of some aristocratic drama she had no business being involved in. I should go, she said quietly. This was a mistake. Was it? Ronan moved slightly, not blocking her path but making it clear she'd have to sidestep him to leave. Because from where I'm standing, this is the first real conversation I've had in months. Real conversation? Elara couldn't stop the bitter laugh. Your Grace, Ronan. Ronan, she conceded, frustration bleeding into her voice. You don't have real conversations with people like me. You have whatever this is, some moment of curiosity or boredom, and then you go back to your world and I go back to mine. That's how this works. What if I don't want it to work that way? Then you're naive, which I don't believe, or you're cruel, which I'm beginning to suspect. His expression shifted, surprise, then something that might have been respect. Cruel? You're drawing attention to me. Right now, half the room is wondering why Duke Hale is spending so much time with Lady Pembroke's companion. By tomorrow, there will be rumors. By next week, I'll be unemployable because no respectable woman will hire someone who might attract her husband's or son's attention. You're risking nothing. I'm risking everything. So yes, cruel. Silence stretched between them. In the background, the orchestra transitioned into a waltz. Couples swirled past in a blur of color and calculated grace. You're right, Ronan said finally. I apologize. That wasn't my intention, but intention matters less than consequence. Elara hadn't expected that. An apology. Acknowledgement of the power imbalance between them. She didn't know what to do with it. I should return to Lady Pembroke, she said again, softer this time. One more question. She waited. If circumstances were different, if you weren't employed, if I weren't who I am, would you want to continue this conversation? The question was unfair in its directness. Elara looked at him, really looked, and saw something she recognized beneath the aristocratic polish. Loneliness. The same kind that echoed through her own chest on nights when the bakery closed and her rented room felt like a cell. Yes, she admitted, but circumstances aren't different. They could be. They won't be. She forced herself to step back, to break whatever strange spell had wrapped around them. Thank you for the conversation, Your Grace. I hope you enjoy the rest of your evening. She turned and walked away before he could respond, before she could do something catastrophically stupid like stay. Her hands trembled slightly as she rejoined Lady Pembroke, and she clasped them together to hide it. My dear, you look flushed, Lady Pembroke observed. Was the conservatory too warm? A bit, yes. The lie came easily. But I'm fine now. Good, good. Oh, there's Lady Winters. I simply must speak with her about the hospital charity drive. Do come along." Elara followed obediently, slipping back into her role like a familiar coat, but she could feel Ronan's gaze tracking her across the ballroom, heavy and persistent as a physical touch. She didn't look back. Couldn't afford to. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and small talk. Elara performed her function perfectly, smiled at the right moments, murmured appropriate responses, faded into the background when needed. By the time Lady Pembroke was ready to leave, near midnight, Elara's feet ached, and her face hurt from maintaining pleasant neutrality. "You were wonderful tonight, dear," Lady Pembroke said as their carriage rattled through the dark streets. "Absolutely wonderful. I'll be sure to tell Madame Celeste." "Thank you, my lady." Lady Pembroke chatted on about the evening's gossip. Who wore what? Who said what to whom? The usual currency of her world. Elara made appropriate noises and stared out the window at the city sliding past. The wealthy neighborhoods gave way to commercial districts, then to the cramped streets where she lived. "Here is fine," Elara said when they reached the bakery. The driver helped her down. Lady Pembroke pressed an envelope into her hand. Her fee plus, Elara discovered when she checked later, a generous tip. Then the carriage rolled away, leaving her alone on the empty street. Elara climbed the narrow stairs to her room, unlocked the door, and stepped into the space that represented everything she'd managed to claw back from poverty. One room, a bed, a table, a chair, a small stove, a window that looked out over the alley. Not much, but hers. She hung up the borrowed dress carefully. Madame Celeste provided appropriate clothing for events, subtracted the cost from fees, and changed into her nightgown. Her reflection in the small mirror looked tired, older than 23. She should sleep. Tomorrow she had another job, a garden party with a nervous debutante who needed coaching through her first real society event. But her mind kept circling back to the ballroom, to gray eyes, and impossible questions. Would you want to continue this conversation? It didn't matter what she wanted. Want was a luxury for people with safety nets and second chances. Want was for women who could afford consequences. Elara climbed into bed and closed her eyes, willing herself toward sleep. She dreamed of winter ice and drowning. The next week passed in a blur of work. The garden party, a theater evening, 2 dinner parties, and a day spent teaching a merchant's daughter how to walk with books balanced on her head. Madame Celeste's parlor was always full of clients these days, the social season in full swing, demand for refined companions at an all-time high. Elara had just finished with a fitting for a new evening gown, paid for by a client who needed her to look the part at an upcoming embassy ball, when Madame Celeste called her into the private office. The madam was a handsome woman in her 50s, sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, who'd built her business from nothing and defended it like a fortress. She sat behind her desk now, a letter in her hands, expression unreadable. "Sit down, Elara." Elara sat, anxiety prickling at the base of her skull. "Is something wrong?" "That depends." Madame Celeste set the letter down carefully. "What exactly happened at the Ashford ball?" The bottom dropped out of Elara's stomach. Nothing. I perform my duties exactly as—" "I'm not accusing you of misconduct." Madame Celeste's tone was careful. "But I need to know what happened, because I've just received a very unusual request." "What kind of request?" "The kind that could either make your career or destroy it." The madam pushed the letter across the desk. "Duke Ronan Hale has requested your services as a companion for his sister." Elara stared at the heavy paper, at the Hale family crest pressed into the wax seal. "His sister?" "Lady Thorne. Apparently she's in town for the season and requires a social companion for various events. The contract would be exclusive. You'd be employed by the Hale household directly for the next 2 months, with a fee that—" Madame Celeste named a figure that made Elara's breath catch. "It's more than you'd make in a year of regular bookings." "Why me?" The words came out barely above a whisper. "That's what I'm asking you. Why would a duke personally request a companion he met for what, 10 minutes at a ball?" Elara's mind raced. This had to be Ronan's doing, but why? Some elaborate game, a way to continue their conversation? Or something darker, a wealthy man who'd decided he wanted something and was used to getting it? "I don't know," she said honestly. We spoke briefly. Nothing inappropriate. He seemed interested in conversation, that's all. Madame Celeste studied her for a long moment. You know what people will say if you accept this. Yes. You know that working for a household, living under their roof, puts you in a vulnerable position. Yes. And you know that if Duke Hale has ulterior motives, you'll have very little protection. I know. Elara's hands twisted in her lap. But I also know what that fee could mean. 6 months of rent paid in advance, money to send to my father for medicine, maybe even enough to save for something better than a room above a bakery. The madam's expression softened slightly. I can't tell you what to do, child, but I can tell you this. Be careful. Men like Ronan Hale don't do anything without reason. Make sure you understand what that reason is before you're in too deep to escape. Elara nodded slowly. How long do I have to decide? He wants an answer by tomorrow. Madame Celeste slid a second envelope across the desk. This is his personal note requesting that you meet with Lady Thorne this afternoon if you're interested in the position. A carriage will be sent to collect you at 2 o'clock. Elara took both envelopes with shaking hands. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. The madam's smile was wry. You might curse my name before this is over. Hotel. The Hale townhouse sat in the most exclusive district of the capital, a massive stone edifice that spoke of old money and older power. Elara stepped out of the carriage, sent exactly at 2 o'clock as promised, and stared up at windows that gleamed like judgmental eyes. A butler answered her knock before it had fully finished echoing. Miss Voss, you're expected. This way, please. The interior was exactly what she'd imagined. All dark wood and oil paintings, thick carpets that swallowed sound, the kind of restrained wealth that didn't need to announce itself. The butler led her through corridors that seemed to stretch forever before stopping at a door. The morning room, he announced, then opened it and stepped aside. Elara walked in and stopped short. A woman sat in a chair by the window, afternoon light turning her hair to copper fire. She was perhaps 20, with the same sharp bone structure as Ronan, but softened by youth, and something that looked like curiosity rather than calculation. She wore a day dress in deep blue, simple but expensive, and studied Elara with frank interest. You're younger than I expected, the woman said. I'm Lydia Thorne. I suppose you're here about the companion position? Lady Thorne. Elara dropped into a curtsy. Yes, my lady, though I'll confess I'm not entirely sure what the position entails. Lydia's laugh was bright and unexpected. Honesty! How refreshing! Please sit. Would you like tea? Thank you. Elara perched on the edge of an elegant settee, feeling desperately out of place among the morning room's casual luxury. Lydia poured with practiced ease, chattering as she did. The position is quite simple, really. I'm newly widowed. My husband died 6 months ago in a riding accident, and I'm just now emerging from mourning. My brother insisted I come to the capital for the season to reconnect with society or some such nonsense. But I've been away for 3 years, and I don't know anyone anymore. The few friends I had married and moved away. I need someone who can help me navigate all the dreadful parties and dinners without making a complete fool of myself. I see. Elara accepted the teacup carefully. Madame Celeste's girls are all trained for exactly that kind of situation. Any of them could, but you're the one Ronan suggested. There it was. Elara set her teacup down precisely. May I ask why? You may ask, but I can't really answer because he didn't give me a reason. Lydia's smile turned sly. Which is interesting, because Ronan always has reasons. He plans everything 6 moves ahead. For him to specifically request you, after one brief meeting. She trailed off meaningfully. I assure you, my lady, there was nothing inappropriate in our conversation. Oh, I'm not worried about inappropriate. I'm worried about boring. Lydia leaned forward conspiratorially. Tell me honestly, is my brother interesting to talk to, or is he as insufferable in private as he is at public events? The question was so unexpected that Elara laughed before she could stop herself. That's not really a question I should answer. Which means, yes, he's insufferable, but you're too polite to say so. Lydia grinned. I like you already. The position is yours if you want it. Just like that? Just like that. Unless you have objections? Elara thought of her father's cough, her tiny room, the endless cycle of bookings and fees that barely kept her afloat. Then she thought of Madame Celeste's warnings, of the risks inherent in accepting employment from a man she'd met once, whose motives she didn't understand. Want was a luxury, but so was safety. "I accept," Elara heard herself say. "When do I start?" "Tomorrow, if you're able." "There's a dinner party at the Thornwoods estate that I absolutely cannot face alone." Lydia's relief was palpable. "You'll stay here, of course. We have more than enough rooms, and it will be much easier than you traveling back and forth." "That's very generous." "It's practical." Lydia waved away the thanks. "Besides, it will be nice to have another woman in the house. Ronan is brilliant, but absolutely hopeless at conversation that doesn't involve trade agreements or parliamentary politics. I've been dying of boredom." They spent the next hour discussing logistics. Elara's belongings would be sent for, she'd have a room in the family wing, she'd be provided with appropriate clothing for events, her fee would be paid monthly. Lydia was easy to talk to, bright and funny, without the cruelty that often accompanied aristocratic charm. But through it all, Elara couldn't shake the awareness that she was being maneuvered into something she didn't fully understand. And when the door opened and Ronan himself appeared, she knew her instinct had been right. "Lydia," he said. Then his gaze found Elara. "Miss Voss." "I've hired her," Lydia announced triumphantly. "She starts tomorrow." "Excellent." If he felt anything about Elara's acceptance, it didn't show in his expression. "Miss Voss, might I have a word before you leave?" It wasn't really a request. Lydia's eyes danced with mischief as Elara stood. "Of course, Your Grace." He led her out of the morning room, down another corridor, into a study lined with books and dominated by a massive desk. He closed the door, not quite proper, but then nothing about this situation was proper. "I want to be clear about something," Ronan said without preamble. "This position is legitimate. Lydia genuinely needs a companion, and you were recommended because you're good at what you do. And I won't pretend I didn't have ulterior motives in suggesting you." He met her gaze directly. "I wanted to continue our conversation. This seemed like the least disruptive way to make that possible." "By employing me?" "By giving us proximity without scandal. You'll be here as Lydia's companion, which is perfectly respectable. If we happen to speak at dinner or cross paths in the house, no one will think twice about it." Elara shook her head slowly. "You really did plan this 6 moves ahead." 7, actually. His mouth quirked. "I want to be very clear. This arrangement comes with no expectations beyond the professional. If you're uncomfortable at any point, you can leave. I'll ensure you're paid through the full 2 months regardless. You have my word." "Why should I trust your word?" "You shouldn't," he said bluntly. "You don't know me, but you accepted the position anyway, which suggests you're either desperate enough not to care about the risk or curious enough to take it." "Maybe both." "Then we're agreed on honesty, at least." He moved to the desk, pulled out a document. "This is your contract. Read it thoroughly. If you have concerns, tell me now." Elara took the papers, scanning the terms. Everything Lydia had outlined was there, plus several clauses protecting her. Termination rights, confidentiality agreements that worked both ways, even a clause about harassment that made it clear any misconduct would result in immediate termination and legal consequences for the offender. "This is fair," she said, surprised. "Did you expect otherwise?" "I didn't know what to expect." She looked up from the contract. "I still don't." "Then we're even. I don't know what to expect from you either." He held out a pen. "But I'd like to find out." Elara stared at the pen, at the contract, at the man who'd upended her carefully controlled life with a single conversation. Every survival instinct screamed at her to run. But beneath that, quieter but persistent, was something else. Curiosity, want, the reckless hope that maybe, just maybe, she could have more than survival. She took the pen and signed her name. The ink dried quickly, binding her to 2 months in the Hale household. 2 months of proximity to a man who saw her when everyone else looked through her. 2 months of standing in the fire instead of hiding from it. Ronan took the contract, countersigned it, and smiled. A real smile, not the polite mask he wore in ballrooms. "Welcome to the family, Miss Voss." And despite everything, despite all her careful walls and hard-won lessons, Elara found herself smiling back. "Thank you, Your Grace." "Ronan," he corrected one more time. "Ronan," she echoed. The name tasted like danger and possibility in equal measure. She had no idea how right she was. Moving into the Hale townhouse felt like stepping into a different world. Not just wealthy. Elara had seen wealth before, served it champagne and smiled at its jokes. This was something else. This was power, old and entrenched, seeping from the walls like cold from stone. Her room was larger than her entire apartment above the bakery. A four-poster bed dominated one wall, draped in deep blue velvet. Real paintings hung on the walls, not prints, originals. The window overlooked a private garden where frost clung to bare branches like diamonds. A writing desk, a wardrobe already stocked with clothes in her size, a vanity with a mirror that showed her looking small and out of place. "It's too much," she'd said when the housekeeper Mrs. Brennan had shown her in. "It's what Lady Thorne requested." Mrs. Brennan's tone made it clear the matter wasn't up for discussion. "Dinner is at 7, family dining room, not the formal hall. Dress is, well, you'll figure it out." The door had closed with a soft click that sounded final. Now Elara sat on the edge of the impossibly soft bed, her few belongings unpacked and looking pathetic in the ornate wardrobe, and tried to remember how to breathe. She'd agreed to 2 months, 8 weeks. 60 days of living among people who treated luxury as baseline existence, while she calculated the cost of everything in meals she could afford. A knock startled her from the spiral. "Come in?" Lydia swept in without waiting for proper invitation, already dressed for dinner in a gown that probably cost more than Elara had made in the past 6 months. "I know that look. You're panicking. Don't." "I'm not." "You are. I did the same thing when I married Lord Thorne and moved into his estate. Couldn't sleep for a week, convinced I'd use the wrong fork or call someone by the wrong title and be exposed as the jumped-up merchant's daughter I was." Lydia perched on the bed beside her. "My father made his fortune in railroads. New money, which means I've spent the last 3 years being reminded I don't really belong. So trust me when I say I know what you're feeling." Elara studied her carefully. "Your husband's family was cruel to you?" "Not cruel, just cold." "Correct. They made sure I knew every rule I was breaking by existing in their world." Lydia's smile turned brittle. "And then James died. And suddenly, they couldn't wait to ship me back to my common roots. His brother inherited everything and made it very clear I was no longer welcome. Ronan was the one who came for me. Showed up with a carriage and told them if they spoke to me that way again, he'd ruin them. And he could. That's what people don't understand about my brother. He's not just wealthy. He's dangerous. I'm beginning to see that." "Good, because you'll need to understand it to survive here." Lydia stood, brushing out her skirts. "Come on. Let me help you dress for dinner, Mrs. Brennan is hopeless at explaining social nuance, and I don't want you walking into the dining room unprepared." The gown Lydia selected was beautiful, deep burgundy silk with clean lines, elegant without being showy. Elara let the other woman fuss with her hair, pinning it up in a style that felt foreign and sophisticated. "There," Lydia said finally, turning her toward the mirror. "You look like you belong." Elara stared at her reflection. The woman looking back could have been someone else entirely, someone who ate at tables like the Hales, someone who mattered. It was a lie, but a convincing one. "Thank you," she managed. "Don't thank me yet. Dinner is when the real test begins." The family dining room was smaller than Elara expected, though still 3 times the size of any room she'd ever eaten in. The table could seat 12, but only 3 places were set. Ronan was already there, reading something on heavy paper, a glass of wine at his elbow. He looked up when they entered. His gaze swept over Elara with the same clinical assessment from the ballroom, but something shifted in his expression. "That color suits you. It's Lydia's choice." "Then my sister has good taste." He set aside his papers and stood. "Please, sit. We don't stand on ceremony for family dinners." Elara caught the word family and felt something twist in her chest. She wasn't family, she was an employee. But Lydia was already guiding her to a seat, and Ronan was pouring wine, and the moment passed too quickly to correct. Dinner was strange. Elara had attended hundreds of formal meals, but always standing against the wall, always watching. Sitting at the table, being included, felt like wearing someone else's skin. The food was excellent. Courses she couldn't name, wine that tasted like bottled sunlight. Lydia kept conversation flowing easily, asking Elara about Madame Celeste's establishment, sharing stories about her disastrous first season. Ronan said little, but Elara felt his attention like heat. Every time she spoke, his focus sharpened. Every opinion she offered, he considered with the same seriousness he'd give a business proposal. "What do you think, Miss Voss?" he asked suddenly, interrupting Lydia's story about a garden party disaster. Elara blinked. "About what, Your Grace?" "Ronan," he corrected automatically. "About the new factory regulations Parliament is debating, the ones requiring minimum wages and safety standards." It was a trap. Had to be. Men like him didn't ask women like her about politics. "I'm not sure my opinion matters." "I wouldn't have asked if it didn't." Lydia watched them with poorly concealed amusement. Elara set down her fork carefully. "Then I think they're overdue. I've seen what happens in factories without regulations. My mother died in one when the owners skimped on fire safety to save money. So yes, I think workers deserve protection, even if it cuts into profit margins." Silence fell. Lydia's eyes went wide. Ronan leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. "Your mother worked in the textile factory that burned down 8 years ago." It wasn't a question. He'd looked into her background. Of course he had. "Yes." 43 people died in that fire. 43 people were murdered by greed, Elara corrected, anger bleeding through her careful control. The exits were locked. The equipment wasn't maintained. The owners paid off inspectors to look the other way. And when it burned, they collected insurance and opened a new factory 6 months later with the same dangerous conditions. "I know." Ronan's voice was quiet. "I was one of the MPs who pushed for prosecution. The owners had connections, bought their way out of consequences. It was one of the first fights I lost in Parliament." Elara stared at him, off balance. "I didn't know that." "Why would you? It was handled quietly, the powerful protecting the powerful." His jaw tightened. "It's why I support the new regulations, why I've been arguing for them for 3 years. But there are enough men in Parliament who profit from exploitation to keep blocking them. Then those men should be removed from power." "Agreed. Any suggestions on how to accomplish that?" He was serious, genuinely asking her opinion like it held weight. Elara's mind raced. Exposure. Make their profits from suffering public. People might tolerate corruption in the abstract, but show them the faces of dead workers, the children who lost parents, the families destroyed. Show them the human cost, and even the wealthy start to feel uncomfortable at dinner parties. "You want to weaponize guilt." Ronan's smile was sharp. "That's ruthless. I like it." "Ronan uses guilt the way other people use seasoning," Lydia interjected, "liberally and without remorse." "It's effective," he said mildly. "Miss Voss, if you're interested, I'm hosting a dinner next week for several MPs who are on the fence about the regulations. Your perspective might be valuable." "You want me at a political dinner?" Elara couldn't keep the disbelief from her voice. "I want someone who can speak to the reality these men are legislating about. Someone who's lived it instead of theorizing from a distance. They won't listen to a paid companion. They will if I introduce you correctly." Ronan's eyes glinted. "Trust me." That word again, trust, like it was simple, like the gap between their worlds could be bridged with conversation and good intentions. "I'll think about it," Elara said finally. "That's all I ask." The rest of dinner passed in lighter conversation, but Elara's mind kept circling back to the exchange. Ronan Hale, Duke and power broker, asking her to influence MPS. Either he was playing some game she couldn't see, or he genuinely believed she had something to offer. Both possibilities terrified her. After dinner, Lydia disappeared to write letters, leaving Elara at loose ends in a house too large and too quiet. She wandered toward the library, drawn by the promise of books and solitude. The library was exactly what she'd dreamed libraries could be. Floor-to-ceiling shelves, rolling ladders, the smell of leather and old paper. She was running her fingers along spines, marveling at the collection, when Ronan's voice came from behind her. "Do you read?" She didn't jump this time, was getting used to his silent approaches. "When I can afford books, which isn't often." "Help yourself to anything here. Consider it part of your compensation." Elara turned to face him. He'd shed his dinner jacket, rolled up his shirt sleeves. It made him look younger, more approachable, more dangerous. "Why are you doing this?" The question escaped before she could stop it. "Offering you books?" "All of it. The job, the dinner conversation, treating me like—" She gestured helplessly. "Like I'm not what I am." Ronan moved closer, close enough that she had to tilt her head to maintain eye contact. "And what are you, Miss Voss?" "Someone you hired. Someone who doesn't belong in your world. Belonging is a fiction, the powerful use to maintain control. I belong here because my father did, and his father before that. But merit, value, those have nothing to do with bloodlines." He pulled a book from the shelf without looking, handed it to her. "You survived poverty, loss, and a system designed to keep you powerless. You've done it with intelligence and dignity. That's worth more than any inherited title." The book was poetry. Byron. Elara clutched it like a shield. "Pretty words don't change reality." "No, but action does, which is why I want you at that dinner." He paused. "And why I need to warn you. Accepting will make you a target." "What do you mean?" "The people fighting against these regulations have a lot to lose. If you speak effectively, if you sway votes, they'll come after you. Not physically," he added quickly, seeing her face. "But they'll dig into your past, spread rumors, try to discredit you, make you unemployable, ruin your reputation so thoroughly that anything you say can be dismissed as the ravings of a bitter servant." Elara's hands tightened on the book. "Then why ask me to do it?" "Because someone needs to. Because these MPs have insulated themselves from consequences and need to face them. And because—" He stopped, something flickering across his expression. "Because I think you're brave enough to handle it, but I won't ask you to take that risk without understanding the cost." The library felt very quiet. Elara stared at him, searching for the game, the manipulation. But all she saw was a man offering her a choice with full knowledge of the dangers. "I'll do it," she heard herself say. "You're sure?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." She lifted her chin. "Those factory owners paid off inspectors and walked away rich while my mother and 42 others died. If I can help stop even one more tragedy like that, I will, whatever the cost." Something shifted in Ronan's eyes. "You're remarkable." "I'm angry. There's a difference." "Remarkable people often are." He stepped back, giving her space. "The dinner is Tuesday. I'll brief you beforehand on the MPs attending, what arguments will sway them. You'll sit beside me, positioned as an expert consultant on labor conditions." "I'm not an expert." "You have more expertise than anyone in that room. You've lived what they're debating." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Get some rest, Miss Voss. Tomorrow Lydia will drag you to the Thornwoods party, and those are never restful." He left before she could respond. Elara stood alone in the library, surrounded by more books than she could read in a lifetime, holding Byron like a lifeline. She'd just agreed to walk into a political fight that could destroy her. The smart thing would be to run. But Elara was tired of running. The Thornwoods estate glittered like something from a fairy tale, all lit windows and music spilling into the cold night. Elara descended from the hail carriage beside Lydia, acutely aware of the eyes already turning their way. "Don't let them smell fear," Lydia murmured. "They're like dogs. They'll tear you apart if they sense weakness." Comforting. "I prefer honest." Lydia linked their arms. "Stay close to me. I'll run interference." The entrance hall was packed with the capital's elite, all performing the same elaborate dance Elara had watched from the sidelines for 8 years. But tonight she wasn't watching from the sidelines. Tonight she was in it, Lydia's hand on her arm like a claim of association. The whispers started immediately. "Who's that with Lady Thorne? Isn't she one of Madame Celeste's girls? What is she doing here as a guest?" Elara kept her spine straight, her expression neutral. Let them whisper. She'd survived worse than gossip. "Lydia!" A woman in emerald silk swept toward them. Lady Cordelia Ashford, looking even more beautiful and more predatory than she had at the ball.
How lovely to see you out and about, and you've brought company. The pause before company was deliberate and cutting. Miss Voss is my companion for the season, Lydia said smoothly. Ronan suggested her after seeing her work at your ball, actually. You know how particular he is about competence. Cordelia's smile tightened. How generous of the Duke to take such interest in his sister's staffing. He takes interest in everything that matters to me. It's rather sweet, really. Lydia's tone was pure innocence, but her eyes were sharp.
Where's your mother? I wanted to compliment her on the floral arrangements. Cordelia was forced to direct them toward Lady Ashford, her irritation barely masked. As they walked away, Lydia whispered, She's been chasing Ronan for 3 years. Seeing you at the townhouse must have driven her mad. I'm not at the townhouse because of Ronan. Aren't you? Lydia's smile was knowing. Keep telling yourself that. The evening proceeded in waves of introduction and veiled hostility. Lydia's friends were curious but welcoming. The older generation treated Elara with the careful politeness reserved for servants who'd gotten above their station, and everywhere the whispers followed. She's living at the Hale townhouse? How inappropriate. Well, we all know what companion really means. Elara heard every word, felt each one like a small cut. She'd known this would happen, had prepared for it, but knowing and experiencing were different things. Dance with me. Ronan appeared at her elbow, sudden and commanding. He'd arrived late, probably deliberately, and now stood offering his hand like he hadn't just dropped a bomb. I don't think, Elara started. It wasn't a request. His eyes held hers. Dance with me, Miss Voss. The ballroom had gone quiet. Every eye focused on them, on the Duke asking his sister's paid companion to dance. Elara could feel the scandal crystallizing in real time. She should refuse, should protect what little reputation she had left. Instead, she took his hand. The orchestra was playing a waltz. Ronan led her onto the floor with practiced ease, one hand settling at her waist, the other clasping hers. They began to move, and Elara discovered that for all her training in deportment and social graces, she'd never actually learned to waltz. Follow my lead, Ronan said quietly. Trust me. There was that word again. But his grip was steady, his movements clear, and Elara found herself following instinctively. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, spinning through the other couples while the whispers crescendoed around them. You're making this worse, she said through a frozen smile. I'm making a statement. What statement? That you enjoy ruining people's reputations? That I don't care what they think? His eyes never left hers. And neither should you. Easy for you to say. You're a duke. I'm remarkable, he interrupted. Brave. Stronger than half the people in this room. And if they're too blind to see it, that's their failure, not yours. The waltz was ending. Applause rippled through the crowd, polite and poisonous. Ronan bowed over her hand, his lips not quite touching her glove. Thank you for the dance, Miss Voss. He walked away before she could respond, leaving her standing alone in the center of the ballroom while every eye dissected her like a specimen. Lydia appeared at her side. Well, that was either brilliant or catastrophic. I haven't decided which. Catastrophic, Elara managed. Definitely catastrophic. Let's get you some air before you pass out. You've gone rather pale. The garden was cold and blessedly empty. Elara gulped the frigid air, trying to calm the panic clawing at her chest. She'd just danced with a duke in front of the entire capital elite. Tomorrow the gossip sheets would be full of speculation. By next week, she'd be unemployable. I should leave, she said, tonight, before this gets worse. It's already worse. Leaving now would just confirm every nasty thing they're saying. Lydia handed her a flask. Brandy, sharp and warming. Drink. Then we're going back inside and facing them together. Lydia, my brother just publicly claimed you as someone worthy of his attention. Do you know what that means? That he's reckless? That he's serious? Lydia's expression was unusually grave. Ronan doesn't make gestures. He plans, calculates. For him to dance with you in front of everyone, knowing the consequences, she trailed off. He's telling them you matter, and when Ronan Hale says something matters, people listen. Eventually. Or they destroy it. Maybe, but you're not as fragile as you think. Lydia took the flask back, sipped. Come on. Lady Pembroke is inside and she's been looking for you. Let's show these vultures you're not running scared. They walked back into the ballroom together. Lady Pembroke was indeed looking for her, but not with the condemnation Elara expected. Instead, the widow's eyes were bright with interest. My dear Miss Voss, dancing with the Duke. You must tell me everything. And like that, the tone shifted. Suddenly, other women wanted to talk to her, to be seen with her. The same people who'd whispered cutting remarks now smiled and asked questions. They didn't like her any better. Elara could see that in their eyes. But Ronan's attention had given her a kind of currency, and they were willing to trade in it. It was disgusting and practical in equal measure. Elara smiled and answered questions and played the game she'd spent 8 years learning from the outside. And all the while she felt Ronan's gaze from across the room, steady and assessing. He'd pushed her into the fire. Now she had to decide whether to burn or forge herself into something harder. The political dinner arrived with the speed of an oncoming train. Ronan had spent 3 evenings briefing Elara on the MPs attending, their positions, their prejudices, their pressure points. She'd absorbed it all with the same focus she'd once used to memorize aristocratic bloodlines and proper forms of address. Remember, Ronan said as they prepared to receive guests, they'll try to dismiss you. Some will be patronizing, some outright hostile. Don't let them rattle you. I've been dismissed by better people than MPs, Elara said dryly. His smile was sharp. That's the spirit. The MPs arrived in a cluster, 6 men ranging from their 40s to their 70s, all radiating the particular arrogance of those who'd held power too long. Ronan introduced Elara as a labor consultant, deliberately vague about her background. Dinner was tense from the first course. The MPs were used to these events being comfortable echo chambers where they agreed with each other and drank expensive wine. Elara's presence disrupted that, even before she spoke. So, Miss Voss, Lord Hartley, a rotund man in his 60s, said with false pleasantry, what exactly qualifies you to advise on labor policy? Direct experience, Lord Hartley. Elara met his gaze levelly. I've worked in factories, lived in workers' housing, seen what happens when profit is prioritized over human life. Ah. His tone dripped condescension. A laborer's perspective, how quaint. Is it quaint when children lose parents to preventable accidents? When families starve because wages can't keep pace with rent? Elara set down her fork carefully. I watched my mother burn to death in a factory where the exits were locked to prevent theft. 42 others died with her. The owners faced no consequences because men like you decided worker safety was too expensive to enforce. Silence crashed over the table. That's, Hartley sputtered. You can't possibly blame. Who else should I blame? Elara's voice stayed level, but fury thrummed beneath it. The workers who had no choice but to take dangerous jobs, or the owners who knowingly created those dangers, or perhaps the MPs who blocked every attempt at regulation because it might hurt their investments. Miss Voss, another MP, Lord Graves, said coldly, your anger is understandable but misplaced. Business requires certain freedoms to function. Excessive regulation stifles growth. Excessive regulation? Elara laughed, sharp and bitter. You call basic safety measures excessive? Fire exits that unlock from the inside? Equipment maintenance? Living wages? The market should determine wages. The market determines that children work 16-hour days for pennies because their parents can't earn enough to feed them. She leaned forward. I've lived in that market, Lord Graves. Have you? His face flushed red. Your personal grievances don't constitute policy. They're not grievances. They're data. Ronan's voice cut through the rising tension. Miss Voss represents thousands of workers whose experiences directly contradict your theories. Perhaps instead of dismissing her, you should listen. To a servant? Hartley's sneer was undisguised now. Really, Hale, this is beneath you. What's beneath me is watching good men die preventable deaths so wealthy men can afford third estates. Ronan's tone could have cut glass. The regulations we're discussing would save lives. The only argument against them is greed disguised as economic theory. The dinner devolved into argument. The MPs who'd been on the fence found themselves confronted with human cost instead of abstract policy. Some, like Lord Graves, dug in harder, but others, younger MPs, ones whose fortunes weren't built on exploitation, started asking questions. What would adequate wages look like? One asked Elara directly. She told him. Told them all about rent prices in workers' districts, food costs, the impossible math of survival on factory wages. Told them about families living 6 to a room, children too malnourished to fight off disease, the casual cruelty of a system that treated human beings as expendable. And through it all, Hartley and his allies grew increasingly hostile. You're playing on sentiment, Hartley said finally, pushing back from the table, using tragic stories to manipulate emotion rather than engaging with economic reality. Economic reality is children dying of hunger, Elara shot back. If acknowledging that is manipulation, then manipulate away. This is pointless. Hartley stood. Hale, I don't know what game you're playing, but bringing a factory girl to lecture your betters is insulting. I'm leaving. Then leave, Ronan said quietly. The door is that way. Hartley's face went purple. 2 other MPs stood with him, disgust clear in their expressions. They swept out in a rustle of indignation, leaving the remaining 3 looking uncomfortable but present. Ronan turned to them. Gentlemen, the vote is next week. I trust you'll consider what you've heard tonight. After they left, polite but non-committal, Elara sank back in her chair, exhausted. That was a disaster. That was effective. Ronan poured himself more wine. Hartley was never going to change his position, but the others were genuinely moved. At least 2 of those votes just shifted. At what cost? You heard how they spoke to me. To us. I heard men with power being challenged and not liking it. He met her eyes. You were magnificent. I was angry. Magnificent, he repeated. And now they'll go back to their clubs and their drawing rooms, and they'll tell everyone about the impertinent factory girl Duke Hale brought to dinner. The gossip will spread. Your name will be attached to the regulations. And when the vote comes, if it passes, they'll blame me. If it fails, they'll mock me. Elara's laugh was hollow. Either way, I'm done in this city. Not if I have anything to say about it. Ronan, she stopped, shook her head. You can't protect me from this. You can shield me partially, maybe, but the moment you're not there, then I'll make sure I'm always there. The words hung between them, weighted with implications neither seemed ready to examine. Elara stood abruptly. I should go. Thank you for dinner. Elara, good night, Your Grace. She fled before he could stop her, before the careful walls she'd built could crumble completely. In her room, she pressed her palms against the cold window glass and tried to remember why she'd agreed to any of this. Below in the garden, frost glittered like broken promises. The gossip hit like wildfire. By the next afternoon, the scandal sheets were full of it. Duke Hale's mysterious factory girl consultant, the shocking dinner, the MPs who'd walked out in protest. Elara's name was everywhere, twisted and analyzed and debated by people who'd never met her. You're famous, Lydia said, dropping a stack of papers on the breakfast table. Or infamous, hard to tell which. Elara scanned the headlines, stomach sinking. They're calling me a radical, an agitator. Well, you did rather agitate Lord Hartley. Lydia's smile was wicked. The man's been writing letters to every newspaper in the capital, claiming you're part of some anarchist plot to destroy the economy. I just want workers not to die preventable deaths. Same thing to men like him. Lydia poured tea with casual elegance. But look at the positive. You've got half the city talking about the regulations. Before this, most people didn't even know Parliament was voting on them. Now it's the only thing anyone's discussing. At my expense. At your profit. Potentially. Notoriety can be useful if you know how to wield it. Before Elara could respond, Ronan strode in with a newspaper clenched in his fist. Have you seen this? Which one? Lydia asked. There are at least 8 different takes on our dinner party. This one. He slapped it down. The headline read, Duke's mistress infiltrates Parliament. Elara's blood went cold. We haven't. I know. But they're implying it anyway. Ronan's jaw was tight with fury.
Lord Hartley gave an interview suggesting you're my kept woman, that I brought you to dinner to use your charms to influence votes. Bastard, Lydia breathed. Elara's hands shook. She folded them in her lap, fighting for control. It's what everyone's been thinking anyway. Now they're just saying it out loud. I won't let them destroy you like this. You can't stop them. She met his eyes. This is what happens when someone like me steps out of line. They tear us down to remind us where we belong. Then we fight back. Ronan's voice was steel. I'm calling in every favor I have. By tomorrow, Hartley will be apologizing or facing consequences. Don't, Elara stood. Don't make me a cause you fight for. That just makes it worse. What do you want me to do? Let them call you a whore? The word cracked through the room like a gunshot. Lydia flinched. Elara went very still. Yes, she said quietly. Let them. Because fighting will just confirm what they already believe. That I'm your mistress. That this is all sexual. That nothing I said matters beyond my connection to you. If you defend me, you make me smaller. Let me stand on my own. Standing alone against this will crush you. Maybe. Or maybe it will prove I can survive without a duke's protection. She straightened her spine. I need to go. I have an appointment with Madame Celeste. She walked out before either of them could argue, grabbed her coat, and fled into the cold morning. Madame Celeste's parlor was exactly as Elara remembered, elegant, neutral, designed to put nervous clients at ease. The madam herself looked older than Elara recalled, though it had only been 2 weeks since they'd last spoken. Elara, the greeting was careful. I wondered when you'd come. You've seen the papers. Everyone's seen the papers. Madame Celeste gestured to a chair. Sit. Tell me the truth. Are you Duke Hale's mistress? No. But you want to be. Elara opened her mouth to deny it, then stopped. What I want doesn't matter. It always matters. The madam's expression softened. I warned you this could happen. Powerful men are dangerous, even the ones who mean well. He means well. I think he genuinely wants to help. And what do you want? The question hit harder than it should have. Elara stared at her hands. I want to matter. I want what I say to have weight. I want... She stopped. I want to stop hiding. Then you're going to get hurt. Badly. Madame Celeste leaned forward. But if that's your choice, I'll support it. I can't offer you work anymore. No client will hire you after this scandal, but I can offer advice. If you're going to burn, burn brightly. Make them remember why they feared you. Elara left the parlor with new resolve and old terror warring in her chest. The vote was in 5 days. 5 days to either validate everything she'd said or prove Hartley right. 5 days to survive. She walked back toward the townhouse through streets that suddenly felt hostile. People stared, whispered. A group of young men catcalled from across the street. Elara kept her head high and kept walking. She was half a block from the townhouse when the carriage pulled up beside her. Cordelia Ashford leaned out the window, beautiful and vicious. Miss Voss! A word. Everything in Elara screamed to keep walking, but curiosity and stubbornness won. Lady Cordelia, get in, please. The please was a threat. Elara climbed into the carriage. Cordelia studied her with cool assessment. You're more resilient than I expected, Cordelia said. Most girls in your position would have run by now. I'm not most girls. Clearly. Cordelia smiled. I'm going to be direct. I want Duke Hale. I've wanted him for 3 years. You're in my way. I'm not. You are. Whether you're sleeping with him or not is irrelevant. He's fixated on you. It's irritating. She leaned back against the velvet seat. So here's my offer. Leave. Go back to wherever you came from. I'll pay you £10,000, enough to start over somewhere new, live comfortably for years. All you have to do is walk away. £10,000. It was more money than Elara had ever imagined having. Enough to buy a house, support her father, live without fear. No, she heard herself say. Cordelia's eyes narrowed. Don't be stupid. You can't win this fight. I have resources, connections, power. You have nothing but Ronan's temporary interest. Take the money and disappear.
I said no. Then you're a fool. Cordelia's voice went cold. I tried to be kind. What happens next is on you. The carriage stopped. Cordelia gestured to the door. Get out. Elara climbed out onto the street, heart hammering. The carriage rolled away, leaving her standing alone in front of the Hale townhouse. She'd just made a very powerful enemy, and the vote was in 4 days. Elara stood on the townhouse steps, staring at the closed door like it might offer answers. Cordelia's threat echoed in her skull. What happens next is on you. 10,000 pounds, a fortune, freedom, and she'd turned it down, because running felt like dying slowly. She pushed through the door. The entrance hall was empty, afternoon light slanting through tall windows. Somewhere upstairs she could hear Lydia's voice, bright with laughter. Normal life continuing around her while she stood in the wreckage of her own making. Miss Voss? Mrs. Brennan appeared from a side hallway, her expression tight. You have a visitor in the small parlor. Elara's stomach dropped. Who? He wouldn't give his name, said it was urgent. The housekeeper's disapproval was palpable. I told him you weren't receiving, but he was insistent. Every instinct screamed danger, but Elara had stopped listening to her instincts 3 weeks ago when she'd signed that contract. Thank you, Mrs. Brennan. The small parlor was used for tradesmen and minor business. The man waiting there wasn't a tradesman. He was young, maybe 30, dressed in clothes that had once been fine but were now worn at the edges. His face was sharp, hungry. A journalist, Elara realized with sinking certainty. Miss Voss. He stood, executed a mocking bow. Thomas Reeves, Capital Chronicle. I was hoping you'd grant me an interview. I don't give interviews. Pity, because I'm writing a story about you either way. Thought you might want to contribute your perspective. He pulled out a notebook, flipped it open. Duke Hale's mysterious companion, former factory worker turned political agitator. Some say mistress, others say radical plant. Which is it? Neither. Come now. You must admit the timing is suspicious. An unknown woman appears, gets employed by one of the kingdom's most powerful dukes. Suddenly she's dining with MPs and advocating for regulations that would devastate entire industries. His smile was all teeth. People are asking questions. Let them ask. They're also asking about your father. Reeves watched her face carefully. Marcus Voss, living in a charity hospital for consumptives in the slums. Must be expensive, even with charity care. How does a woman in your position afford it? Ice flooded Elara's veins. Leave my father out of this. Hard to do when the story's so compelling. Poor factory girl, desperate to save her dying father, catches a duke's eye. What wouldn't a woman do in that situation? He leaned forward. Did you seduce him? Or did he make you an offer you couldn't refuse? Elara's hand moved before her brain caught up, slapping him hard enough that his head snapped sideways. The crack echoed like a gunshot. Reeves touched his reddening cheek, eyes glittering. Thank you. That quote will read beautifully. When asked about her relationship with Duke Hale, Miss Voss became violent. Get out. I'm going. But Miss Voss? He tucked his notebook away. Your father's in Ward 7 of St. Clement's Hospital. Public record. Anyone can find him. Anyone can ask him questions about his daughter's sudden fortune. He smiled. Sleep well. He left. Elara stood shaking in the empty parlor, rage and terror fighting for dominance. Her father. They were going after her father. She had to move, had to warn him, protect him, something, but her legs wouldn't cooperate, rooted to expensive carpet while her world collapsed. Elara? Ronan's voice came from the doorway. Mrs. Brennan said, what happened? Journalist. Threatened my father. The words came out flat, mechanical. I hit him. He's going to write that I'm violent, unstable. Everything Hartley's been saying. Ronan crossed to her in 3 strides. Where is he? Gone. But he knows where my father is. St. Clement's, Ward 7. She finally looked up, met his eyes. I need to go, now, before they get to him first. I'll send guards. No, I need to be there. I need... Her voice cracked. He's all I have left. If they hurt him to get to me, they won't. I promise you, they won't. Ronan's hand settled on her shoulders, warm and steady. But you can't go alone. Let me come with you. That will make it worse. It's already worse. His grip tightened. Let me help. She wanted to refuse, wanted to handle this alone, prove she didn't need his protection. But terror for her father overrode pride. Okay. The carriage ride to St. Clement's felt endless. Ronan sat across from her, silent but present, giving her space to spiral. The hospital was in the poorest district, a crumbling building that smelled of carbolic and despair. Elara had visited every week for 8 years, watching her father waste away one labored breath at a time. Ward 7 was on the 3rd floor. They climbed stairs that reeked of sickness, past patients too far gone to notice. The ward sister, a grim woman named Agnes, who Elara had charmed over years of visits, looked up as they entered. Elara, wasn't expecting you until Sunday. Then her eyes found Ronan and widened. Your Grace. Sister Agnes, I'm here with Miss Voss. Her father, is he well? Same as always, coughing more this week. Agnes's gaze sharpened. There was a man here earlier, asking questions about Marcus. I sent him away, but he seemed determined. Did he speak to my father? Elara's voice was tight. No, Marcus was sleeping, and I don't wake patients for journalists. She paused. What's this about, child? Nothing good. Can I see him? Agnes led them to a bed near the window. Marcus Voss looked small against the white sheets, his frame hollowed by years of illness. His hair, once dark like Elara's, had gone gray, but his eyes, when they opened, were still sharp. Ellie? His voice was a rasp. It's not Sunday. I know, Papa. She pulled a chair close, took his hand. The bones felt fragile as bird wings. I needed to see you. Something wrong? His gaze flicked to Ronan, confusion and wariness mixing. Who's this? Duke Ronan Hale, sir. Ronan stayed back, giving them space. I'm employing your daughter. Marcus's eyes narrowed. Employing? That what we're calling it? Papa? I see the papers, Ellie. Even in here I see them. They're calling you his mistress. His hand tightened on hers. Tell me it's not true. It's not. She met his eyes steadily. I work for his sister, as a companion, that's all. Then why is he here? Because people are trying to hurt me by going after you. We came to make sure you're safe. Marcus studied her for a long moment, then shifted his gaze to Ronan. You care about my daughter. I do, Ronan said simply. Enough to protect her, or just enough to use her? Papa! Elara's face flamed, but Ronan didn't flinch. Enough to protect her, even from consequences I created. Good answer. Marcus coughed, a wet rattling sound that made Elara's chest ache. When it passed, he squeezed her hand weakly. You're in trouble. I'm handling it. By slapping journalists? His smile was faint. Agnes has gossip networks you wouldn't believe. I heard about your dinner with the MPS. Heard you gave them hell. You disapprove. I'm proud. His eyes glistened. Your mother would be too. She always said you had more fight in you than sense. Looks like she was right. Tears threatened. Elara blinked them back. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to bring trouble to your door. You brought hope. Those regulations pass. Maybe the next factory girl keeps her mother. He coughed again. Worth any trouble. They stayed another hour. Ronan arranged for private guards to watch the ward, discreet but present. When they finally left, Marcus was sleeping, his breathing easier than it had been. Thank you, Elara said as the carriage rolled through darkening streets. For coming, for the guards, for not making this harder than it had to be. Your father's a good man. He's dying, the words hurt to say. The consumption is winning. Maybe a year left if he's lucky. I'm sorry. They rode in silence. The city outside transformed as they moved from slums to wealth, gas lamps replacing oil, cobblestones giving way to smooth pavement. Two different worlds divided by invisible walls. I need to tell you something, Ronan said as they neared the townhouse. Before you hear it from someone else. Elara braced. What? Lady Cordelia's father owns the Capital Chronicle. Thomas Reeves works for him. The implication hit like a fist. She sent him. Almost certainly. This is how she fights, through proxies and scandal. Tomorrow's paper will have that story. By evening, every drawing room in the capital will be discussing it. And the vote is in 3 days. Elara laughed, hollow. Perfect timing. We can fight this. I can issue a statement. No. She cut him off. We've been over this. You defending me just confirms what they're saying. Then what do you want to do? I don't know. The admission felt like defeat. But I'm tired of reacting, tired of being the victim in everyone else's story. The carriage stopped. Ronan studied her in the dim interior light. You're not a victim. You're a threat. That's why they're so desperate to destroy you. Threats get eliminated. Or they win. He reached across, covered her hand with his. The touch sent heat up her arm. You're not alone in this fight, Elara. She wanted to believe him, wanted to lean into the warmth he offered, the protection, the partnership. But 8 years of survival had taught her that relying on anyone was dangerous. Still, his hand was warm, and she was so tired of being cold. The next morning, the Capital Chronicle ran its story. Reeves had been thorough. Details about her father's illness, speculation about how she'd afforded his care, thinly veiled accusations of prostitution. The headline screamed, Duke's radical mistress, desperate daughter, or political plant. Elara read it over breakfast while Lydia swore creatively and Ronan paced like a caged predator. I'm going to ruin him, Ronan said. Ashford and his daughter both. I have enough dirt to bury them. No. Elara set the paper down carefully. That makes you look vindictive. Makes me look like I need you to fight my battles. What do you suggest? Lydia demanded. Let them call you a whore and a fraud without consequence. I suggest we let them overplay their hand. An idea was forming, dangerous and desperate. They think I'm weak, controllable. Let's prove them wrong. How? Ronan stopped pacing. The vote is Thursday. Parliament opens to the public gallery for major votes. She met his eyes. What if I was there? Absolutely not, Ronan said immediately. The gallery will be full of people who hate you. It's not safe. Since when has safety been the priority? Elara stood. They're calling me a coward who hides behind you. I show up, face them directly, show I'm not afraid. That's a statement no article can counter. It's also a target on your back. I already have a target on my back. At least this way I'm choosing where to stand when they shoot. Lydia looked between them. She's right. Strategically, it's brilliant. Practically, it's suicidal. So very on brand for this entire disaster. Ronan's jaw worked. If something happens to you, then I'll handle it, like I've handled everything else. Elara's voice softened. I need to do this, Ronan. Not for the regulations, for me. I need to prove I can stand without hiding. The silence stretched. Finally, Ronan nodded once, sharp. Fine. But you don't go alone. Lydia and I will be there. And if anyone so much as looks at you wrong, you'll maintain perfect aristocratic composure and do nothing, Elara interrupted. Because me fighting my own battles is the entire point. His smile was grim. You're going to get yourself killed. Maybe, but I'll go down swinging. The 3 days before the vote passed in a blur of preparation and mounting tension. The scandal sheets ran new articles daily, each one more vicious than the last. Elara was a seductress, a radical, a plant by foreign powers to destabilize the kingdom. Her father was labeled a drunkard, her mother's death reframed as her own fault for taking dangerous work. Hate mail arrived by the stack, death threats, propositions. One letter contained a detailed description of what the writer wanted to do to put her in her place. Elara burned them all in the library fireplace and tried not to think about the person behind each one. The night before the vote, she couldn't sleep. She stood at her window watching frost creep across the garden, mind churning with everything that could go wrong. A knock. It's me, Ronan's voice came through the door. Come in. He entered carrying 2 glasses and a bottle of whiskey. Thought you might need this. Is it that obvious I'm terrified? You'd be stupid not to be. He poured, handed her a glass. But terrified doesn't mean defeated. They drank in silence. The whiskey burned, grounding. Elara studied Ronan's reflection in the window, the sharp lines of his face, the tension in his shoulders. He'd been fighting for these regulations for 3 years. Tomorrow would determine if that fight meant anything. "Why do you care so much?" she asked. "About the regulations, I mean. You're wealthy. They don't affect you. They affect people who work for me, people I'm responsible for." He stared into his glass. "My father was a bastard in most ways, but he taught me one thing. Power is obligation. If you have it and don't use it to protect those who don't, you're just a well-dressed thief. Most powerful people don't see it that way. Most powerful people are cowards." He looked at her directly. "You're not. That's why they're so desperate to destroy you. You remind them what courage actually looks like." "I'm not courageous. I'm just too angry to quit." "Same thing sometimes." He set down his glass. "Elara, if tomorrow goes badly, if they vote no, if the backlash gets worse, I want you to know something. Don't." She cut him off. "Don't say goodbye things. We're not there yet." "I'm not saying goodbye. I'm saying—" He stopped, searching for words. "I'm saying you matter. What you've done matters. Even if we lose, even if they destroy us both, you've changed things. People are listening who never listened before. Because you made them listen. No, because you spoke truth they couldn't ignore." He moved closer. "I've spent years playing political games, making calculated moves, trying to change things from inside a system designed to resist change. You walked in and just set it on fire. That's not a compliment. It's the highest compliment I know how to give." His hand came up, hesitated, then touched her cheek. The gesture was so gentle it made her chest ache. "You're remarkable, Elara Voss." She should step back, should maintain professional distance, should remember all the reasons this was dangerous. Instead, she leaned into his touch. "You're not what I expected." "What did you expect?" "Someone colder, more calculating, not someone who'd risk everything for factory workers he's never met." "I'm plenty calculating. I calculated that having you here would be worth any scandal." His thumb brushed her cheekbone. "I was right." The air between them felt charged, dangerous. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. She was acutely aware of how close he was, how easy it would be to close the distance, to find out if his lips were as warm as his hands. "Ronan," she whispered, "tell me to leave and I will." She should, knew she should. This was exactly what everyone accused them of. What would destroy her credibility if it got out? But standing here in the dark with him touching her like she was precious, like she mattered, she couldn't make herself care about consequences. "Stay," she said. He kissed her, slow and deliberate, like he was memorizing the taste of her. Elara's hands fisted in his shirt, pulling him closer. The kiss deepened, desperation bleeding through careful control. This was reckless and stupid, and exactly what Cordelia and Hartley and all of them wanted to accuse her of. She didn't care. Ronan pulled back first, breathing hard. "This is a terrible idea." "I know." "If anyone finds out, they won't." She met his eyes. "One night, just tonight. Tomorrow we go back to being Duke and employee, but tonight we're just Ronan and Elara." "Yes." He kissed her again, and Elara let herself fall into it. Let herself have this one thing, this one moment of want instead of survival. Tomorrow there would be consequences. Tomorrow there was the vote and the mob and whatever fresh hell Cordelia had planned. But tonight she got to be someone who mattered to someone who mattered to her. They broke apart eventually, both shaking slightly. Ronan rested his forehead against hers. "I should go." Probably. Neither of them moved. "Tomorrow," Ronan said finally. "Whatever happens, we face it together." "Together," Elara echoed. He left. Elara stood alone in her room, fingers pressed to lips that still tingled, and tried to feel guilty, tried to regret it. Couldn't. She was too tired of denying herself everything. Parliament convened at 10. By 9:30, the public gallery was packed with people who'd come to watch the spectacle. Elara walked in, flanked by Lydia and Ronan, chin high despite the sea of hostile faces turning toward her. The whispers started immediately, hisses and mutters that built into a low roar. "That's her! The whore! How dare she show her face? Elara kept walking. They'd secured seats in the front row of the gallery, which meant she'd be visible to everyone below. Visible to the MPs whose votes would decide everything. Visible to Cordelia Ashford, who sat 3 rows back with her father, their expressions promising violence. The speaker called the session to order. The gallery fell silent. The debate began. MP after MP stood to argue for or against the regulations. The ones against used familiar arguments: economic freedom, excessive government control, the natural order of business. The ones for cited worker deaths, family tragedies, the moral imperative to protect the vulnerable. And then Lord Hartley stood. "This entire debate has been poisoned by outside influence," he began, voice ringing through the chamber. "By a woman of questionable character using emotional manipulation to sway votes that should be decided on economic merit alone." Elara's hands clenched in her lap. "Miss Elara Voss," Hartley continued, "has no expertise beyond her own tragic circumstance. She has used that tragedy to infiltrate the highest levels of society through means I leave to your imagination, and now she sits in our gallery, watching us like she has any right to be here, like her presence matters." He looked directly up at her. "It doesn't. Factory girls don't make policy. They follow it. And this vote will remind everyone of that natural order." Rage flooded Elara's vision. Beside her, Ronan tensed. She stood. The gallery erupted. Shouts of outrage, gasps of shock. The speaker banged his gavel for order. Ronan grabbed her arm. "Elara, don't." But she shook him off. "Lord Hartley," she called down, voice cutting through the chaos. "You say I don't matter, that factory girls should know their place. But 43 people died because men like you decided their lives were worth less than profit. My mother was one of them. She matters. They all matter. And if you can't see that, if you're so blinded by greed that human lives mean nothing to you, remove her," Hartley roared. "She has no right to speak here." "I have every right." Elara's voice shook with fury. "You want to talk about natural order? The natural order is that workers die so men like you can buy third estates, that children starve so you can have another racehorse. That's the order you're defending." Guards were moving toward the gallery. The speaker was shouting for order. Below, MPs were on their feet, some shouting agreement, others demanding her removal. Ronan stood beside her. "She speaks for thousands who can't speak for themselves. If you silence her, you silence them all. This is Parliament, not a theater," Hartley snarled. "Remove them both." "No." Another voice from the floor. Lord Graves, one of the MPs who'd attended the dinner. "Let her speak. If we're voting on regulations that affect workers, maybe we should hear from one." The chamber erupted in argument. Half the MPs shouted agreement, half demanded order. The guards reached the gallery, grabbed Elara's arms. "Don't touch her," Ronan said, voice deadly quiet. "Your Grace, we have orders." "I said don't touch her." The standoff lasted seconds that felt like hours. Then Lord Ashford stood, Cordelia's father, his face purple with rage. "Duke Hale, you are making a mockery of these proceedings. Control your mistress, or—" "She's not my mistress." Ronan's voice carried across the sudden silence. "She's the woman I intend to marry." The world stopped. Elara's heart stopped. Every eye in Parliament turned to them. "What?" she breathed. Ronan looked at her and she saw it in his face. This wasn't planned, wasn't calculated. This was desperation and truth colliding. "Marry me." "You've lost your mind." "Probably, but I'm asking anyway." He turned to address the entire chamber. "Elara Voss will be my Duchess, which means attacking her is attacking the Hale name. So if you want to silence her, you'll have to go through me first." Chaos. Pure, absolute chaos. MPs shouting, the gallery in an uproar, the speaker pounding his gavel until it cracked. Cordelia's scream of rage cut through the noise like broken glass. And Elara stood frozen, the world spinning around her, while the man she'd kissed last night offered her everything she'd never dared to want in front of everyone who'd spent weeks trying to destroy her. "Say something," Ronan said quietly, just for her. She had 2 choices. Accept and become the scandal of the century, or refuse and prove Cordelia right, that she was temporary, unworthy, beneath him. Both options would destroy her, but one would destroy her while standing beside someone who saw her. Yes, she heard herself say. The roar that followed shook the walls. The roar that followed shook the walls. Parliament had devolved into complete pandemonium, MPs on their feet shouting, the gallery erupting in shock and fury, the speaker's gavel pounding uselessly against wood that might as well have been silence. Elara couldn't move, couldn't breathe. Ronan's proposal hung in the air between them like something alive and dangerous. "Clear the gallery," the speaker was bellowing. "This session is suspended pending—" But his words were drowned in the chaos. Someone threw something, Elara didn't see what, that shattered against the wall near her head. Ronan pulled her down, shielding her with his body as guards finally managed to push through the mob. "Move!" One guard grabbed Elara's arm, not gently. "Now!" They were half-dragged, half-carried from the gallery. Behind them, Cordelia's voice rose above the noise. "This is a farce, a transparent manipulation. You can't seriously—" The doors slammed shut, cutting off the rest. Elara found herself in a narrow corridor, Ronan beside her, Lydia being escorted by another guard. Her ears rang, her hands shook. "What did you do?" she demanded, rounding on Ronan. "What the hell did you just do?" "Saved you from being thrown out of Parliament like a criminal." His voice was tight, controlled, but she could see the wildness in his eyes. "They were going to drag you out, publicly humiliate you. I couldn't—" "So you proposed? In front of Parliament? In front of everyone?" Her voice pitched higher. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "Protected you. You've ruined me." The words came out raw. "They were calling me your mistress, and you just confirmed it. You made me look exactly like what they accused me of being, a gold digger who seduced her way into a title." "That's not, isn't it?" She laughed, hollow and sharp. "Poor factory girl becomes Duchess through convenient scandal? That's the story they'll tell. That's what everyone will believe." "Elara," Lydia tried to interject. "And the vote," Elara continued, ignoring her. "We just destroyed any chance those regulations had. The MPs who were on the fence will vote no just to spite you. The ones who supported it will distance themselves to avoid being associated with this circus. You've ruined everything." Ronan's face had gone very still. "I was trying to help. By making me your charity case, your noble sacrifice?" Tears threatened. Elara blinked them back furiously. "I didn't ask for this. I didn't want—" "What did you want?" His control cracked. "To be torn apart by that mob? To be removed like garbage while they sneered and called you a whore? I gave you protection. I didn't want protection. I wanted to stand on my own." She was shouting now, didn't care. "I wanted to prove I could survive without you rescuing me. But you couldn't let me have that, could you? You had to swoop in and solve it the only way dukes know how, by throwing your title around like it fixes everything." "It does fix things. It means they can't touch you without consequences. It means I'm yours now, your property, your responsibility, your project." Her voice broke. "I've spent 8 years clawing my way out of nothing, building something for myself. And you just took all of that and made it about you." Silence fell, sharp and cutting. Ronan looked like she'd slapped him. Lydia stood frozen between them, clearly wishing she was anywhere else. "Is that what you think?" Ronan said finally, voice low. "That I proposed to make you mine? Didn't you? I proposed because I love you, you stubborn, impossible woman." The words exploded out of him. "Because watching you stand up there and fight them with nothing but your courage and your rage made me realize I've probably loved you since that first night at the Ashford ball. And yes, I should have asked privately. Yes, I should have thought it through. But they were going to drag you out like a criminal, and I couldn't—" He stopped, jaw working. "I couldn't let them destroy you." Elara stared at him. "You don't love me. You barely know me. I know you survived impossible things. I know you're brave and angry and brilliant. I know you make me want to be better than I am." He stepped closer. "And I know that if I have to choose between watching you fight alone and fighting beside you, I choose you, every time." The corridor felt too small, too airless. Elara's heart hammered against her ribs. "This is insane." "Agreed. We'll be destroyed. Probably. And the regulations? I don't care about the regulations." His voice was steady now.
I care about you.
If they vote no, we'll find another way. But I won't let them tear you apart to prove a point. Elara opened her mouth, closed it. Every argument she had dissolved under the raw honesty in his eyes. He meant it. He actually meant it. You're an idiot, she said finally. I'm aware. This won't end well. It might. He reached out, hesitated, then took her hand. Or it might be a disaster. But I'd rather fail spectacularly with you than succeed safely without you. That's the most ridiculous thing I've ever heard. And yet you're not saying no. She wasn't, should be, should run as far from this catastrophe as possible, but his hand was warm in hers, and despite everything, the scandal, the chaos, the absolute insanity of the situation, she didn't want to let go. I'm still angry at you, she said. I'd be worried if you weren't. And this doesn't fix anything. We're still in the middle of a disaster. A disaster we'll navigate together. He squeezed her hand. If you'll have me. Elara looked at Lydia, who'd been silent through the entire exchange. Your opinion? My opinion is you're both insane, and I love it. Lydia's grin was wicked. Also, grandmother's going to lose her mind, which makes this even better. Your grandmother, Elara repeated. The Dowager Duchess, who I haven't met. Who you'll meet very soon, I imagine. Ronan's smile was grim. She'll have heard about this within the hour. We should probably get ahead of it. How do you get ahead of proposing in Parliament? Very carefully. He turned to the guard. Is there a back exit? There was. They slipped out through servant passages, avoiding the main entrance where journalists were undoubtedly swarming. The carriage ride back to the townhouse was silent, each of them lost in their own spiraling thoughts. Mrs. Brennan met them at the door, face pale. Your Grace, there are people outside, shouting. Ronan swore. How many? 20? 30? I've locked all the doors and closed the shutters, but they're demanding to see Miss Voss. The housekeeper's hands twisted in her apron. Some are supportive. Most aren't. Elara moved to the window, peered through a crack in the shutters. A crowd had gathered on the street outside, a mix of well-dressed society members and rougher-looking men who'd clearly been paid to cause trouble. Signs waved above their heads. Hale's whore. Radical liar. One particularly creative soul had drawn a crude caricature of her being hanged. Charming, she said flatly. We need to move you somewhere safer, Ronan started. No. Elara let the curtain drop. I'm not running. Not from a mob. Not from this. Elara, they want me to run, to hide, to disappear. That's what makes them comfortable, knowing that people like me stay in our place. She turned to face him. I'm done with that. Done hiding. Done apologizing for existing. Lydia was grinning again. I really like her, Ronan. Please don't mess this up. A commotion at the front door interrupted them. Raised voices, Mrs. Brennan's protests, then footsteps that sounded like an invading army. Elara's hand instinctively went to Ronan's arm. The drawing room doors opened. A woman swept in like winter personified. She had to be 70, maybe older, but age had refined rather than diminished her. White hair swept back in an elaborate style, clothes that were 20 years out of fashion, but made with such quality they transcended trends. Eyes the same gray as Ronan's, but colder, sharper. Grandmother, Ronan said, I wasn't expecting clearly. The Dowager Duchess's gaze swept over them, lingered on Elara. So this is the factory girl causing all the trouble. Elara straightened her spine. Elara Voss, Your Grace. I know who you are. The entire kingdom knows who you are. The Dowager moved further into the room, leaning heavily on a silver-topped cane. The question is whether you know what you've done. I've accepted your grandson's proposal. His public, spectacular, utterly ill-conceived proposal. The Dowager's lip curled. In Parliament, in front of the entire political establishment, do you have any idea the scandal you've created? Some, Elara said evenly, though I wasn't the one who proposed. No, but you said yes, which makes you complicit in this disaster. She turned to Ronan. What were you thinking? I was thinking I wanted to marry her. You don't marry scandal, Ronan. You contain it, manage it, make it disappear. The Dowager's cane tapped against the floor. This girl, woman, Elara corrected. I'm 23, not 12. Those gray eyes snapped back to her. This woman is a liability. She's been branded a radical, a seductress, a gold digger. Half the kingdom wants her arrested, the other half wants her burned. And you want to make her Duchess Hale? Yes? Then you're a fool. Probably, Ronan agreed. But I'm a fool who knows what he wants. The dowager studied him for a long moment. Then, surprisingly, she laughed, a sharp, bitter sound. You remind me of your grandfather. He was a fool too. Married a merchant's daughter when everyone said it would ruin the family. My grandmother, Lydia breathed. You never talk about her. Because she was brilliant and terrifying and made my life hell for 30 years. The dowager's expression softened fractionally. But she was also right about most things, and the family thrived under her influence, scandal be damned. She focused on Elara again. So, you think you can handle being a duchess? No, Elara said honestly, but I handled being invisible for 8 years. I can learn to be visible. Learning to be visible is easy. Learning to wield visibility as a weapon, that's the trick. The dowager moved to a chair, sat with careful dignity. Tell me what you want, Miss Voss. Truly want. Not what you think I want to hear. It felt like a test. Probably was. Elara considered lying, giving some noble answer about love and duty. But this woman had seen through better liars than her. I want to matter, she said. I want what I say to have weight. I want to stop surviving and start living, and… She paused. I want the factory regulations to pass. I want my mother's death to mean something. The regulations are doomed now, you realize. Your fiancé's little theatrical display guaranteed that. Maybe. Or maybe it reminded people what's at stake. Elara met the dowager's eyes. 43 people died because safety was expensive. How many more before we decide profit isn't worth human lives? You're naive if you think Parliament cares about human lives. I'm angry enough not to care what they think. The dowager smiled, a real smile, not the social mask. You'll do. I'm sorry? Elara blinked. You're rough around the edges. You'll make enemies. Half of society will cut you dead, and the other half will wait for you to fail. The old woman's gaze was steel. But you have spine. That's rarer than you'd think among the nobility, so you'll do. You're approving this? I'm acknowledging reality. Ronan has made his choice, publicly and spectacularly. Trying to undo it now would cause more damage than moving forward. She pointed her cane at Elara. But understand this, you will be tested, constantly, brutally. Every mistake magnified, every success diminished. If you're going to be Duchess Hale, you need to be perfect. No one's perfect. Then you need to fake it convincingly. The dowager stood. I'll handle the social damage control. You'll handle not making things worse. Can you do that? Elara thought of the mob outside, the scandal sheets, Cordelia's rage and Hartley's vindication, thought of every way this could still fall apart. I can try. Trying is for children. Duchesses succeed or they're destroyed. The dowager moved toward the door, then paused. The wedding will be in 3 weeks. Society wedding, full ceremony. We'll make it so grand and so public that anyone who boycotts marks themselves as an enemy of the Hale family. Understood? 3 weeks? Elara's voice pitched up. That's adequate time if we start immediately. Lydia will help you. I'll handle the guest list. She looked at Ronan. You'll announce your engagement formally tomorrow. Full statement to every paper. Make it clear this was planned, not impulsive, and that anyone who speaks against your future wife will answer to you. Consider it done. Good. The dowager swept out as dramatically as she'd entered, leaving shocked silence in her wake. Did that just happen? Elara asked faintly. Grandmother approves of you, Lydia said, sounding awed. She never approves of anyone. Ronan, I think she likes Elara more than she likes you. She probably does. Ronan crossed to Elara, took both her hands. Are you all right? I'm engaged to a duke, with a wedding in 3 weeks. She laughed, slightly hysterical. No, I'm very much not all right. We can still… Don't. She squeezed his hands. Don't offer me an escape. I'm choosing this. Terrified, furious at you for how it happened, but choosing it. Just tell me we survive this.
We survived this. He pulled her close. Together. Outside, the mob continued shouting, but inside, wrapped in Ronan's arms with Lydia beaming at them and the Dowager's grudging approval still echoing, Elara let herself believe it might be true. The next morning, every newspaper in the capital ran the engagement announcement. Ronan's statement was clear and uncompromising. Elara Voss was to be his Duchess. The wedding would proceed as planned, and anyone who questioned his choice questioned him. The reaction was immediate and vicious. Half the aristocracy declared they wouldn't attend. The other half wouldn't commit either way, waiting to see which side won. Cordelia Ashford published her own statement, dripping with false sympathy, suggesting Ronan had been trapped by a calculating woman who'd used his nobility against him. Elara burned the scandal sheets and focused on survival. The 3 weeks before the wedding passed in a blur of preparation and mounting pressure. Dress fittings where seamstresses whispered behind their hands, etiquette lessons with a woman who barely concealed her contempt for teaching a commoner, dance practice where Elara's feet blistered and her patience wore thin. No, no, the dance instructor snapped for the 100th time. A Duchess glides. You're stomping like a farm hand. I've never claimed to be graceful, Elara said through gritted teeth. Then learn, quickly. The first dance at your wedding will be watched by hundreds. Every misstep will be analyzed. The woman's lip curled. Though perhaps that's inevitable given your background. Elara's hands clenched. My background is surviving poverty and loss, while people like you taught rich girls to curtsy. I think I'll manage. She walked out before the instructor could respond, found herself in the library, surrounded by books and blessed silence. Hiding? Lydia's voice came from the doorway. Regretting every life choice that led me here. Too late for that. Lydia flopped onto a sofa. The invitations went out today. 300 responses expected. So far we have 47 confirmations. And how many regrets? 112. Lydia's smile was brittle. The rest are pretending they never received the invitation. Standard coward behavior. Elara sank into a chair. This is going to be a disaster. Probably. But grandmother has a plan. She always has a plan. The plan, it turned out, was audacious even by the Dowager's standards. She used every favor owed to the Hale family over 3 generations, called in debts, made subtle threats, and orchestrated a campaign that would have impressed a general. By the second week, confirmations were rising. People who'd initially refused found themselves suddenly eager to attend. Others who'd been sitting on the fence decided neutrality was more dangerous than taking a side. How is she doing this? Elara asked Ronan after a particularly vicious etiquette session. Reminding people that the Hales have power beyond social approval. Business contracts, political influence, financial backing. She's making it clear that insulting you means losing access to all of it. He looked tired. Dark circles under his eyes, tension in his shoulders. The vote got delayed. Elara's heart sank. The regulations? Postponed indefinitely pending further review. Translation, they're killing it slowly to avoid making it look like they're killing it because of us. His jaw tightened. I'm sorry. I know how much you wanted. It's not your fault. Isn't it? If I hadn't proposed, then I'd have been dragged out of Parliament and the vote would have failed anyway. At least this way we're fighting back. She took his hand. We knew this wouldn't be easy. I didn't know it would be this hard on you. I've survived harder. She squeezed his fingers. I survived losing my mother, living in poverty, 8 years of being invisible. I can survive a few aristocrats with opinions. He pulled her close, buried his face in her hair. I love you. The words still felt strange, wonderful and terrifying in equal measure. I know. That's not an answer. It's the answer you're getting until I figure out what love means when it's not just survival. She pulled back to meet his eyes. I care about you deeply. Maybe that's love, maybe it's something else, but it's real. That enough for now? It's everything. They stood together in the library while outside the world continued trying to tear them apart, and Elara let herself believe they might survive. The wedding approached with the speed of an oncoming disaster. The morning of, Elara woke in her room at the townhouse. Tradition dictated she couldn't see Ronan before the ceremony, and stared at the elaborate gown hanging on the wardrobe. White silk, layers of lace, pearl buttons that had probably cost more than her father's hospital care for a year.
It was beautiful. It was a costume. It was everything she'd never imagined having. It was terrifying. "You're awake." Lydia appeared with tea and a conspiratorial smile. "Good. We have 4 hours to transform you into a duchess." The transformation was painful. Corsets cinched tight enough to restrict breathing, hair pulled and pinned until her scalp ached, cosmetics applied with scientific precision. When they finally lowered the dress over her head and fastened the hundreds of buttons, Elara barely recognized herself in the mirror. "You look like a fairy tale," Lydia breathed. "I look like someone else." "You look like a duchess, which, in a few hours, you will be." Lydia adjusted the veil. "How do you feel?" "Like I might vomit." "That's normal. I vomited twice before my wedding." She squeezed Elara's hand. "You've got this, and if anyone gives you trouble, I'll stab them with a cake knife." The cathedral was massive, built to hold 1,000 people and make everyone inside feel small before powers greater than themselves. Elara stood in the entrance, arm-linked with a family friend of Ronan's who'd agreed to escort her. Her father was too ill to attend, something that made her chest ache. The doors opened, music swelled. Every head in the cathedral turned. Elara forced herself to walk. One step, then another. The aisle stretched forever, lined with faces she didn't know. Many hostile, some curious, a few, very few, genuinely welcoming. Halfway down, she spotted her father's hospital ward sister, Agnes, in simple clothes that marked her as hired help. The woman's eyes were wet. She mouthed, "Proud of you." Elara's vision blurred. She blinked hard, focused forward. Ronan stood at the altar in full formal dress, severe and beautiful. When their eyes met, he smiled. Not the social mask, but real warmth. She made it to the altar without falling, barely. The ceremony was a blur. Words she'd memorized, responses she gave automatically, the weight of a ring slipping onto her finger. Ronan's hands were steady. Hers shook. "Do you, Elara Voss, take this man?" "I do." Her voice didn't waver. "Do you, Ronan Hale, take this woman?" "I do." Absolute certainty. "Then by the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss your bride." Ronan's hands framed her face. The kiss was gentle, careful, aware of hundreds of eyes watching. When they broke apart, he whispered, "We did it. We survived the wedding. That's different from winning. It's a start." They turned to face the congregation. The cathedral erupted in applause, genuine or performed, impossible to tell. But it didn't matter. They'd done it. Against all odds, against all opposition, they'd stood together and claimed each other in front of everyone who'd tried to tear them apart. The recessional march began. They walked back down the aisle as Duke and Duchess Hale, and Elara kept her spine straight and her head high even as she heard the whispers starting. "Can't believe he actually married her. Give it a year before he regrets. Common blood in the Hale line, disgraceful." Let them whisper. She'd survived worse. The reception was held at the Hale estate outside the city, a massive property that looked like something from a storybook. Hundreds of guests milled through ballrooms and gardens, eating food that cost more than most families made in a month. Elara smiled until her face hurt, accepted congratulations from people who clearly wished her dead, made small talk with aristocrats who looked at her like she was a fascinating insect. "Duchess Hale," a familiar voice said. Cordelia Ashford, resplendent in emerald silk, smile sharp as broken glass. "Congratulations." "Lady Cordelia." Elara kept her voice neutral. "You must be so pleased with yourself, clawing your way from the gutter to a duchess title. Quite the accomplishment." "I didn't claw, I walked. There's a difference." "Is there?" Cordelia's eyes glittered. "Tell me, do you ever worry he'll wake up one day and realize what he's done? That he's tied himself to factory trash?" The insult should have stung, would have, weeks ago. But Elara had survived Parliament, survived scandal, survived a mob outside her door. Cordelia's venom felt almost quaint. "No," she said simply, "because I know my worth. Pity you don't know yours. If you did, you wouldn't need to tear others down to feel powerful." Cordelia's face went white with rage. Before she could respond, the dowager appeared like an avenging angel.
Lady Cordelia, how kind of you to attend despite your obvious distress. The old woman's smile was poisonous. Do give your father my regards. I hear his business interests have been struggling lately. Such a shame when good investments go bad. The threat was clear. Cordelia's mouth opened, closed. She fled without another word. Well handled, the Dowager said to Elara. You're learning. Learning what? That power isn't about being liked. It's about being feared just enough that people think twice before attacking. She tapped her cane. Come. Time for the first dance. Show them you belong. The ballroom had been cleared for dancing. Ronan waited at the center, hand extended. Elara took it, let him lead her into position. The orchestra struck up a waltz. Ready? He murmured. No, but let's do it anyway. They began to move. Elara focused on the steps she'd practiced until her feet bled, trying not to think about the hundreds of eyes watching, judging, waiting for her to fail. And then, halfway through, she stumbled. The misstep was small, barely noticeable, but in the silence of the ballroom, it felt catastrophic. Elara's heart stopped. She'd just proven every critic right. She didn't belong, couldn't manage even basic aristocratic graces. Ronan's hand tightened on her waist. He spun her, made the stumble look intentional, a flourish rather than a mistake. When they came back together, he whispered, You're perfect. I nearly fell. You recovered. That's what matters. They finished the dance to polite applause. As they stepped off the floor, something shifted in the room's energy. People who'd been watching with barely concealed schadenfreude looked uncertain. The Dowager's approval was obvious in her nod. And then, from the crowd, Agnes the ward sister began to clap. Really clap, loud and genuine and utterly inappropriate for an aristocratic wedding. Others joined her. Not aristocrats, servants who'd been positioned around the room, workers from Ronan's factories who'd been invited despite social convention, a handful of MPs who'd supported the regulations. The applause grew, spreading like fire. The aristocrats had no choice but to join in or look churlish. Elara stood beside her husband, surrounded by unlikely allies, and felt something shift in her chest. Not victory, not yet, but the beginning of it. The first crack in the wall that had kept people like her out of places like this. Thank you, she said to Agnes later, when she could steal a moment. For what? For being here, for clapping, for reminding me why this matters. Agnes patted her hand. Your mother would be proud. So's your father. I visited him this morning to tell him about the wedding. He wanted you to know. Tears threatened. Elara blinked them back. Thank you. The reception wound down eventually. Guests departed with varying degrees of enthusiasm. Cordelia left early, defeat written in every line of her body. Lord Hartley didn't attend at all, but sent a gift, a set of factory manuals, his idea of an insult. Elara displayed them prominently. If he meant it as mockery, she'd take it as acknowledgement. By midnight, only family remained. Lydia, the Dowager, a handful of Ronan's relatives who'd actually meant their congratulations. They gathered in the library, exhausted and triumphant. To the new Duchess hail, the Dowager said, raising her glass. May she give them all hell. To surviving the wedding, Lydia added. To whatever comes next, Ronan finished, looking at Elara. She raised her own glass. To not backing down. They drank, and Elara let herself feel it. Not happiness, not yet, but something close. Hope, maybe. Or defiance. Or the beginning of believing she could be more than she'd ever imagined. Outside, the capital slept. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new opposition, new chances to fail. But tonight, Elara Voss, no, Elara Hale, Duchess, stood among people who'd chosen her, who'd fought for her, who'd seen her value when the world said she had none. And that, she thought, was worth every sacrifice. Outside, the capital slept. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new opposition, new chances to fail. But tonight, Elara Voss, no, Elara Hale, Duchess, stood among people who'd chosen her, who'd fought for her, who'd seen her value when the world said she had none. And that, she thought, was worth every sacrifice. The euphoria lasted exactly 12 hours. Elara woke in the master suite of the Hale estate, Ronan's arm around her waist, morning light streaming through windows that overlooked grounds larger than the entire district where she'd grown up.
For a moment, she let herself exist in the warmth and quiet. Then reality crashed back. She was a duchess now, which meant today and every day after, she'd have to prove she deserved to be. "You're thinking too loud." Ronan's voice was rough with sleep. "I can hear it from here." "Sorry." "Don't be." He pulled her closer. "Just tell me what's spinning through that brilliant, anxious mind." "Everything. Nothing. The fact that we survived the wedding, but that was just the beginning." She turned to face him. "What happens now?" "Now we go to breakfast. Face whatever fresh disasters the morning papers brought. Probably argue with my grandmother about something." His smile was gentle. "The usual." "The usual for a duchess, not for me." "Then we figure it out together." He kissed her forehead. "Come on. Coffee first. Existential dread second." Breakfast was in the smaller dining room, still larger than most people's houses, where Lydia was already reading newspapers with an expression that promised nothing good. "Morning, lovebirds," she said without looking up. "Hope you enjoyed your wedding night, because the honeymoon is definitely over." Elara poured coffee with hands that only shook slightly. "How bad?" "Depends on your metric. Socially, catastrophic. Half the scandal sheets are calling the wedding a travesty. The other half are running breathless romance stories about the Duke who married for love." Lydia flipped a page. "Politically, though, this is interesting." She slid a paper across the table. The headline read, "Factory workers rally in support of new Duchess." Elara's heart stuttered. "What?" "Someone organized a demonstration outside Parliament yesterday. Workers from across the city demanding the vote on regulations be reinstated. They're saying if the aristocracy won't listen to you, they will." Lydia's grin was fierce. "You've become a symbol." "I didn't ask to be a symbol." "Best symbols never do." Ronan was reading over her shoulder. "This is significant. If we can mobilize worker support, Parliament will have to respond. Ignoring aristocrats is easy. Ignoring thousands of angry laborers is dangerous. You want to use this." Elara set down her coffee carefully. "Turn my wedding into political leverage. I want to finish what we started." His eyes met hers. "Those regulations matter. Your mother's death matters. If we can use the attention the wedding generated to push Parliament into action, then I become exactly what they accuse me of being, a political tool, someone who married you for power and influence." "You married me in spite of power and influence," Ronan said quietly. "Everyone saw that. The workers saw it. That's why they're rallying, not because you're calculating, but because you're real." Elara wanted to argue, but the image of factory workers, people like her mother, like the version of herself she'd been, standing outside Parliament demanding change, that meant something. More than aristocratic approval, more than social acceptance. "What do you need me to do?" she asked. Before Ronan could answer, Mrs. Brennan appeared in the doorway, face pale. "Your Grace, forgive the interruption, but there's a situation." "What kind of situation?" Ronan was already standing. "St. Clement's Hospital sent word. Miss Voss's, forgive me, her Grace's father has taken a turn. They don't expect him to last the day." The room tilted. Elara gripped the table edge, knuckles white. "I need to go. Now." "I'll have the carriage," Ronan started. "Now!" The word came out sharp, desperate. They made it to St. Clement's in record time, Elara barely breathing the entire ride. Her father couldn't die. Not now. Not when she'd finally clawed her way to a position where she could give him better care, more comfort, something beyond charity wards and hopeless prognoses. Sister Agnes met them at the ward entrance, eyes red. "He's been asking for you, kept saying your name." Elara ran. Down corridors that reeked of carbolic, past beds filled with dying men, to the corner where her father lay propped on pillows that did nothing to ease his labored breathing. "Papa?" She took his hand. It felt like paper, all bones and fragile skin. Marcus's eyes opened, focused on her with effort. "Ellie, you came. You?" "Of course I came." Tears streamed down her face. "I'm here, I'm right here. Married now." His smile was faint. "My daughter. A duchess. Your mother would have laughed herself sick. She would have been proud, like I know you are." "So proud." He coughed, a wet rattle that made Elara's chest constrict. "But worried too.
You've made powerful enemies, girl. Men who won't forgive being challenged by someone they see as beneath them. Let them try. Her voice broke. I'm not backing down. Not from them. Not from anyone. Good. That's good. His grip tightened with surprising strength. But Ellie, promise me something. Anything. Don't let anger consume you. Your mother died angry at the world, and it ate her alive even before the fire. Fight, yes, but don't forget to live, to be happy. His eyes found Ronan, who stood back, giving them space. You picked a good one. Better than I expected when I saw those scandal sheets. Papa, hush. Let a dying man speak. Marcus's breathing was getting worse. I'm proud of you. Every day of your life I've been proud. Tell me you know that. I know. The words came out choked. I know, Papa. Then I can go easy. His eyes started to close. Love you, Ellie girl. Give 'em hell. I will. I promise. His breathing slowed, steadied, then stopped. Elara felt the world crack open beneath her. She'd known this was coming, had known for years that consumption was a death sentence, that her father was living on borrowed time, but knowing didn't make it hurt less, didn't fill the sudden void where his presence had been. She stayed beside the bed long after Agnes confirmed what she already knew, holding his cooling hand and crying for the man who'd never stopped believing in her, even when she'd stopped believing in herself. Ronan stood silent vigil behind her. When she finally stood, legs shaking, he was there to catch her. I've got you, he murmured. I've got you. They buried Marcus Voss 3 days later in a cemetery outside the city, where common people rested in simple graves marked with wooden crosses. Elara had wanted to give him something grander, a monument, a place among the aristocratic dead, but Lydia had talked her out of it. He was a worker, Lydia had said gently. Honor that. Let him rest among his people. So they did. The funeral was small. Elara, Ronan, Lydia, Agnes, and a handful of hospital staff, a few factory workers who'd known Marcus years ago. No society presence, no spectacle, just grief and goodbye. He was a good man, Agnes said afterward. Raised a hell of a daughter. That's legacy enough. Elara nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Back at the estate, she locked herself in the library and stared at nothing. The regulations debate had been scheduled for next week, Parliament finally bowing to public pressure, but she couldn't bring herself to care. Her father was dead. The man who'd given her courage, who'd believed she could be more than survival, was gone. What was the point of fighting when he wasn't here to see her win? Elara! The dowager's voice cut through her fog. The old woman stood in the doorway, leaning on her cane. A word? I'm not really in the mood for... I didn't ask if you were in the mood. I said I need a word. The dowager moved into the room, settled into a chair with careful dignity. You're drowning. My father just died. I'm aware. I buried a husband and 2 sons. I know what grief looks like. Her tone softened fractionally. But you're not just grieving. You're giving up. Elara's hands clenched. I'm not. You are. You're thinking that because he's gone, the fight doesn't matter. That proving yourself was about making him proud, and without him watching, what's the point? The dowager's gray eyes, so like Ronan's, were relentless. Am I wrong? She wasn't. Elara looked away. Thought so. The dowager tapped her cane. Let me tell you something about grief, girl. It lies. Tells you nothing matters, that pain is permanent, that you should just surrender because fighting hurts too much. And if you listen to it, grief wins. Your enemies win. Everything your father believed about you gets proven wrong. He's dead. He won't know either way. No, but you will. The old woman leaned forward. You think he raised you to quit the moment things got hard? Taught you survival so you'd give up when it mattered most? He'd be ashamed. The words hit like a slap. Elara's head snapped up. How dare? I dare because someone needs to. Your husband is too gentle to say it. Lydia loves you too much to push, so I will. The dowager stood. The vote is in 4 days. Thousands of workers are watching to see if the Duchess who promised to fight for them actually meant it,
or if aristocratic comfort made her forget where she came from. What are you going to show them? She left before Elara could respond. The library fell silent except for the crackle of the fire. Elara sat in the expensive chair, in the expensive room, in the expensive life she'd never imagined having, and heard her father's voice as clearly as if he stood beside her. "Give 'em hell, Ellie girl." She stood, wiped her eyes, straightened her spine. He was right. The dowager was right. Grief was trying to drown her, but she'd survived worse than grief. She'd survived poverty and loss and 8 years of invisibility. She could survive this, and more than survive. She could win. She found Ronan in his study, surrounded by papers and looking exhausted. He glanced up when she entered, concern immediate in his expression. "Elara, are you—" "I need to address Parliament," she said. "Before the vote. I need to speak." He blinked. "That's unprecedented. Duchesses don't address Parliament." "This Duchess does. Or what was the point of any of this?" She moved to the desk, planted her hands on it. "My father died believing I could change things. I'm not proving him wrong by hiding while men who've never known hardship decide if workers deserve basic safety. I'm speaking. Find a way to make it happen." A slow smile spread across Ronan's face. "There might be a way. If we frame it as expert testimony rather than a speech, get enough MPs to request your presence, then do it. Use every favor, every connection, every ounce of power this title gives me. I want to stand in that chamber and make them listen. They'll crucify you. Let them try." She met his eyes. "I'm done being afraid of powerful men. Time to remind them why they should be afraid of me." The next 4 days were a whirlwind of preparation. Ronan called in every political favor owed to the Hale family. The dowager used her considerable influence to pressure MPS into agreeing to hear testimony. Lydia helped Elara craft a speech that was part testimony, part indictment, part rallying cry. And through it all, Elara felt her father's presence like a hand on her shoulder, pushing her forward, refusing to let her quit. The morning of the vote, she woke before dawn, dressed in black, mourning clothes, but also armor. The message was clear. She was grieving, but she wasn't broken. Ronan found her in the library, staring at her prepared speech. "Ready?" "No, but I'm doing it anyway." "That's my Duchess." He pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "Whatever happens today, I'm proud of you." "Save the pride for after we win." Parliament was chaos before they even arrived. The worker demonstrations had grown. Thousands now, filling the streets around the building, holding signs demanding justice, chanting Elara's name. Inside, MPs who'd hoped for a quiet vote found themselves facing public scrutiny on a scale they'd never experienced. Lord Hartley's face when Elara entered was priceless, pure rage barely contained beneath aristocratic composure. Cordelia sat in the gallery, arms crossed, expression promising murder. Let them rage. Elara had stopped caring about their approval. The speaker called the session to order. Several MPs stood to argue against allowing Elara to speak. It was improper, unprecedented, a mockery of parliamentary tradition, but enough voices argued for it that the objection was overruled. "Duchess Hale," the speaker said finally. "You have 10 minutes. Use them wisely." Elara stood, every eye in the chamber fixed on her. She could feel the weight of their judgment, their skepticism, their hope that she'd fail. She stepped to the designated speaking position and set aside her prepared speech. The words she'd carefully crafted suddenly felt wrong, too polished, too careful. She'd speak from the heart instead, from the raw truth of everything she'd survived. "My mother's name was Elara Voss," she began. "She worked in a textile factory in the Western District. The day she died, she'd been on shift for 14 hours. She was exhausted. Everyone was. But the owners demanded productivity, so they locked the exits to prevent workers from leaving early or taking unauthorized breaks." Her voice was steady, clear. "When the fire started, caused by faulty equipment that hadn't been maintained because maintenance was expensive, those locked doors became death traps. 43 people burned or were trampled trying to escape. My mother was one of them. She died screaming my name while factory owners who'd prioritized profit over safety suffered no consequences." She let that sink in. Let them see her grief, her rage. I was 15. My father was already sick with consumption from years of factory work. We lost everything. I spent the next 8 years learning how to be invisible, how to survive in a world that made it very clear people like me didn't matter, that our pain was acceptable collateral damage for your comfort. This is emotional manipulation, Hartley tried to interject. This is truth, Elara cut him off. The truth you've spent 3 years avoiding, that workers aren't abstractions. We're people. We have families. We suffer when you decide safety regulations are too expensive. We die when you prioritize profit over human life. She scanned the chamber, meeting eyes of MPS who looked uncomfortable, angry, moved. Some of you think I married Duke Hale to gain power, to infiltrate your world and disrupt it from within. You're half right. I did disrupt it, but not through manipulation, through the simple act of refusing to disappear, of standing here and demanding you see us, all of us, the workers whose labor funds your estates, whose deaths you legislate from the comfort of chambers they'll never enter. Her hands gripped the podium. The regulations you're voting on today won't solve everything. They won't bring back my mother or the 42 people who died with her. They won't cure my father's consumption or undo 8 years of poverty, but they'll save lives. They'll tell workers that their safety matters, that they're worth more than the cost of maintaining equipment or unlocking a door. She paused. Let silence fill the chamber. My father died 3 days ago. His last words to me were, "Give 'em hell." So I'm standing here in this place that was built to exclude people like me, and I'm giving you hell. I'm telling you that history will judge what you do today, that your children's children will ask why you voted to let workers die preventable deaths, and whatever excuse you give, economic freedom, business rights, government overreach, won't erase the blood on your hands if you vote no. You go too far. Hartley was on his feet. This is slander. This is accountability. Elara's voice rang out, something you're not used to facing. But the workers outside aren't going away. The people watching this vote aren't going to forget who stood with them and who stood against them. So vote your conscience, if you have one. But know that we're watching and will remember. She stepped back. The chamber erupted, some MPs shouting agreement, others outrage, the gallery in chaos. The speaker pounded his gavel uselessly. Elara returned to her seat beside Ronan. Her hands shook, her heart hammered, but she'd done it. She'd spoken truth to power and survived. That, Ronan said quietly, was magnificent. The vote took hours. Every MP felt compelled to speechify, to explain their position, to cover themselves against whatever consequences their choice would bring. Elara sat through it all, Ronan's hand in hers, barely breathing. Finally, after what felt like years, the speaker called for the count. All in favor of the Worker Protection and Safety Regulations Act? Hands rose. Elara counted frantically. 42, 45, 50. All opposed? More hands. Her heart sank. The tally took forever. Then, the ayes have it. The Worker Protection and Safety Regulations Act passes by a margin of 63 to 59. The chamber exploded. Outside, the workers erupted in cheers so loud they shook the building. Inside, MPs who'd voted yes looked relieved or triumphant or terrified. Those who'd voted no sat in grim-faced defeat. Elara couldn't move, couldn't process. They'd won. Against all odds, against Hartley's opposition and Cordelia's sabotage and every aristocrat who'd said it was impossible, they'd won. We did it, Ronan breathed. Elara, we actually did it. She turned to him, tears streaming down her face. My mother is avenged. Her death meant something. You made it mean something. They left Parliament to chaos, journalists swarming, workers cheering, aristocrats fleeing the mob. Elara pushed through to where Agnes stood with a group of hospital workers, all of them crying and laughing and hugging each other. You did it! Agnes grabbed Elara in a fierce embrace. You beautiful, stubborn girl. You actually did it. We did it, Elara corrected. All of us. The celebration lasted through the night. Workers poured into the streets. Taverns offered free drinks. Someone started a bonfire in front of Parliament that city guards half-heartedly tried to contain.
Elara found herself swept up in it, this pure, uncomplicated joy that came from winning something everyone said was impossible. But as the night wore on and exhaustion set in, she felt the weight of it, the responsibility. She wasn't just Elara Voss anymore, the invisible girl who'd survived through careful anonymity. She was Duchess Hale, a symbol, a voice for people who'd been voiceless. That terrified her more than any scandal ever had.
Come on, Ronan said when he found her sitting alone in a garden at the estate, watching the city burn with celebration in the distance.
You need rest. I need to figure out what happens next. Next we take a breath, celebrate the win. Then we find the next fight. He sat beside her. But tonight, we just exist, together. She leaned against him, bone-tired and heart-sick and weirdly, impossibly happy. I keep thinking about what my father said, about not letting anger consume me, about living, not just fighting. Wise man. He was. Is that possible, do you think? To fight for change and still find joy? I think you're doing it right now. Ronan's arms settled around her shoulders. You won a battle today. Changed the kingdom. Gave thousands of workers hope that things can be better. That's worth celebrating. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we face whatever comes. But tonight, he turned her face toward his, kissed her gently. Tonight we remember that some things are worth more than fighting, like this, like us. She kissed him back, pouring everything she couldn't say into it. Gratitude and love and grief and hope all tangled together. When they finally broke apart, the city was quieter, the celebrations winding down, a new day approaching. I love you, Elara said. The first time she'd said it out loud. It felt like jumping off a cliff. Ronan's smile was sunlight. Took you long enough. I'm not good at this, at trusting, at believing good things can last. Then we'll figure it out together. He stood, pulled her to her feet. Come to bed, Duchess. Tomorrow you can change the world again. Tonight you're just Elara. And I'm just Ronan. And that's enough. It was enough. More than enough. 3 months later, Elara stood in the grand ballroom of the Hale estate, surrounded by workers and aristocrats in an uneasy but functional mix. The first annual Worker Safety Foundation Gala was in full swing, an event she'd organized to raise funds for families affected by industrial accidents. The idea had been met with skepticism from both sides. Workers didn't trust aristocrats to care about their welfare. Aristocrats didn't want to associate with common people. But Elara had pushed it through with the same stubborn determination she'd used to survive everything else. Now factory owners wrote checks to avoid looking heartless. Society women competed over who could appear most charitable. Workers attended in their best clothes, uncertain but present. It wasn't perfect. Nothing ever was. But it was progress. Duchess Hale. A familiar voice made her turn. Lord Graves, one of the MPs who'd voted yes, approached with his wife. The foundation is doing excellent work. I wanted to contribute. He handed her an envelope. For the hospital fund. Thank you, Lord Graves. Elara accepted it gracefully. Every contribution helps. It's the least I can do. Your speech in Parliament? He paused. It changed how I see things. Made me realize we've been legislating in a vacuum. Thank you for that. He moved on. Elara opened the envelope, a check for £5,000. Enough to fund a new hospital wing. You're gathering allies, Lydia observed, appearing with champagne. Even Graves. That's impressive. Graves has a conscience. He just needed permission to use it. Elara sipped her drink. How's the turnout? Better than expected. 200 confirmed guests and only minimal incidents of aristocrats being insufferable. Lydia grinned. Though Lady Winters did ask me if the workers knew which fork to use. I told her most of them were too busy working to eat with forks at all. She hasn't spoken to me since. Your sacrifice is appreciated. They watched the party swirl around them, this impossible mix of worlds colliding, not smoothly, not without friction, but colliding nonetheless. Your father would be proud, Lydia said quietly. You've done what you set out to do, changed things. I've started changing things, Elara corrected. There's so much more work. The regulations only cover factories. What about mines, domestic workers, agricultural laborers, And enforcement is still a mess. Owners are finding loopholes faster than we can close them. So you'll keep fighting. Until I can't anymore. She looked at Lydia. Is that naive? Thinking one person can actually make a difference? You already have made a difference. Look around. This room exists because you refuse to stay invisible. Those regulations exist because you wouldn't shut up. Workers have hope because you proved someone from their world could stand in Parliament and win. Lydia squeezed her hand. That's not naive. That's extraordinary. Ronan found her later when the party had thinned and exhaustion was setting in. There's someone who wants to meet you. He led her to a quiet corner where an elderly woman waited, weathered face, rough hands, eyes that held decades of hard living. Duchess, the woman said, voice rough, I'm Margaret Chen. My daughter worked at the factory where your mother died. Elara's breath caught. Did she? She survived, barely. Burns over half her body. Margaret's hands twisted together. The new regulations mean the factory where she works now has proper exits, fire equipment, safety training. It means if another fire starts, she might actually survive it. Tears tracked down weathered cheeks. I wanted to thank you for fighting, for not forgetting us. Elara embraced her, this stranger who represented thousands of families she'd never meet. I won't forget, I promise. When Margaret left, Elara stood with Ronan in the quiet ballroom, surrounded by the remnants of impossible victory. I keep waiting for it to feel real, she admitted. The title, the power, the changes we're making. Like I'll wake up and still be that 15-year-old girl standing outside a burning factory. You're still that girl, Ronan said. Just one who learned to stop hiding, to stop being invisible, to demand the world see her. And if I lose myself in all this, become just another aristocrat who forgot where she came from? You won't. Because I won't let you. Lydia won't let you. That entire room full of workers won't let you. He turned her to face him. And because you're too angry to forget. That anger, that refusal to accept injustice, that's who you are. Title doesn't change that. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that she could navigate this strange new life without losing the core of who she was. What if it's not enough? She whispered. What if I fight and nothing really changes? Then you'll have tried, fought, refused to accept the world as it is. He kissed her forehead. That's legacy enough. The gala ended. Guests departed. Staff cleaned up while Elara stood at a window watching the city sleep. Somewhere out there, factories ran through the night with proper safety measures because she'd refused to stay silent. Families slept easier knowing their loved ones had safer working conditions. Children had futures that didn't involve orphanhood from preventable industrial accidents. It wasn't enough. Would never be enough. But it was something. And something was more than nothing. A year after the wedding, Elara stood in the same Parliament gallery where everything had changed. But this time, she wasn't fighting for recognition or defending her right to exist in aristocratic spaces. This time, she was here because she'd been invited, asked to observe the debate on extending worker protections to domestic servants. The chamber looked different from this side of victory, less intimidating, just a room full of flawed people making consequential decisions. Lord Hartley was gone. His opposition to regulations had cost him his seat in a special election. Cordelia had married some minor noble and moved to the countryside, her vendetta exhausted. The MPs who'd voted no faced angry constituents and professional consequences. And the ones who'd voted yes? They were introducing new legislation, expanding protections. Using Elara's testimony as a template for how to include worker voices in policy debates. Progress. Slow and imperfect, but real. After the session, Ronan found her in the corridor. Ready? For what? There's something I want to show you. He took her to the Western District, to the burned-out shell of the factory where her mother died. Elara hadn't been back since the funeral, couldn't bear to see it, but it wasn't a ruin anymore. The old building had been demolished, replaced with something new, a hospital, modern, well-equipped, built specifically to serve factory workers and their families. The Worker Safety Foundation's first major project, Ronan explained, funded by the gala contributions and matching funds from MPs who felt guilty. It opens next month.
A plaque stood near the entrance. Elara moved closer, read the inscription. Elara Voss Memorial Hospital, in memory of Elara Voss and 42 workers who died in the factory fire of 1818. May their sacrifice remind us that every life has value, and safety is not a luxury, but a right. We can change it, Ronan said quickly. If you don't like, it's perfect. Elara's voice broke. She traced her mother's name with shaking fingers. She'd have hated the fuss, but she'd have loved knowing her death saved others. They stood together as the sun set over the Western District, painting everything gold. This place of tragedy transformed into something that might prevent future tragedies. It wasn't resurrection, couldn't bring back the dead, but it honored them, made their suffering mean something.
Thank you, Elara said, for this, for everything, for seeing me when I was invisible. You were never invisible, Ronan corrected gently. You were just surrounded by blind people. I was lucky enough to actually look. She leaned against him, this man who'd upended her life in the best possible way. I love you, in case I don't say it enough. You say it plenty, every time you fight for something that matters, every time you refuse to give up, every time you choose courage over safety. He kissed the top of her head. I love you too. My brilliant, stubborn, impossible Duchess. They stayed until dark, watching lights flicker on in factory windows across the district, each one representing lives that might be saved by regulations Elara had fought for, by safety measures she'd demanded, by the simple, revolutionary act of refusing to stay silent. The walk back to the carriage took them past the old bakery where Elara had rented her room. She stopped, looked up at the window that had been hers. That girl who lived there, she said quietly, the one who worked for Madame Celeste and counted every penny and thought survival was the best she could hope for. She wouldn't believe where I am now. She'd be proud, though, of who you became. I think she'd be terrified, but yeah, proud too. Elara turned away from the window. Let's go home. Home. The word still felt strange, but the estate was home now, filled with Lydia's laughter and the dowager's sharp observations and staff who'd stopped treating Elara like an interloper and started treating her like family. Home was Ronan's library and gardens she could wander freely, and a place where she belonged, not because of birth, but because she'd claimed it. That night, Elara dreamed of her parents. Her mother, young and laughing before factories and fire. Her father, cough-free and healthy, pride shining in his eyes. They stood in a field of impossible flowers, and her mother said, "Look at you, our girl. You did good, Ellie." "I tried," Elara said in the dream. "I'm still trying." That's all anyone can do. Try, fight, refuse to give up. Her mother's smile was sunlight. "We're proud of you, both of us, always." She woke to morning light and Ronan's arm around her waist and the absolute certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Not because fate had decreed it, but because she'd fought for it, survived for it, refused to accept a world that said people like her didn't deserve happiness. The girl who'd been invisible had become impossible to ignore. The factory worker's daughter had become a duchess. The survivor had become a symbol of what was possible when courage outweighed fear. And somewhere, in whatever place the dead go, Clara and Marcus Voss smiled and knew their daughter had given them hell. The very best kind. Elara Voss? Elara Hale? Duchess? Rose to face another day of fighting for a better world. And for the first time in her life, she did it without fear. Because she'd learned the most important lesson of all, she was worth fighting for. And so was everyone else the world tried to make invisible. That was power, real, lasting, revolutionary power. And she'd burn down anyone who tried to take it away.